During the interview, what should I call you? You can call me John.
You can call me Tia. We're on a first name basis already. It's
Yeah,
it's starting off well.
perfect. Well, I hope so. Or if you'd rather watch, I will call you whatever you're most comfortable with. But Thea will be perfectly fine. Excellent. John again. And let's go ahead and start. You're working on your thesis. Is this for your honors in psychology or bachelor's in law? That's what I found in your background in terms of education.
Yeah, so in South Africa we have a weird system.
Okay.
I could have gone in straight into law, which would have been 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
but I chose a bachelor's in law, which is 3 years. Now,
Okay.
the conundrum is you can't go on and study abroad because abroad most places have a 4 year bachelor's degree. So in
Mm.
their eyes, I don't yet have a 4 year degree. I have a 3 year one. So after law, I went on to do my psychology now, which is my fourth year,
Okay.
and that in its own is a degree. So I'm now doing my
Interesting.
my practice thesis in my psychology degree.
Interesting. What led you to make that decision? Because it sounds like the 4-year degree is this very linear, straightforward path for law, but you went for the 3-in-1 combo. Like, what motivated that?
Yes. Well, firstly, the fact that I have zero idea what I want to do with my life, and secondly, what's nice with the bachelor's in law, the reason, well,
Mm-hmm.
what you do is you do your 3 years in law, and then you need to
Okay.
do another 2 years in law to
Like,
be to get to practice law essentially instead
like
of just four. So
makes
what you
sense.
did then is they gave you other modules that wasn't just law
Mm-hmm.
related. So I got to do psychology, English. So I got to
Interesting.
experiment a little bit with other things I might have liked, which was the idea in the first place.
So, why did you choose to do? So, you did 3 years in law, you did this experimental year, and then if you want to continue being a lawyer, do 2 more years. Why did you not start with the experimenting first and then do the law afterwards? Like, how did that end up coming about?
Okay, so well, the experimenting would have been like a solid 3 year degree in something else. And if
Interesting.
I then wanted to do law, I would have had to do another 4 years. So
Ooh,
that's like a lot of commitment right there to
interesting.
experiment. So I thought I'd rather experiment while I'm doing my actual degree.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the experimenting takes me into a different direction, which it did, I can simply do my fourth year in that said degree and go on from there without wasting time.
Interesting. Okay. So, what degree did you? It sounds like you're pivoting away from law. What are you moving towards? Is this where psychology comes in? Mm-hmm.
Totally, totally. So I normally have the saying I take it one degree at a time because it's almost impossible to know where you're gonna like end off.
Uh huh.
I don't know if I'm gonna end up in academia or if I become one of those people that lawyers call up for psychological evidence.
Yep.
But for now, forensic psychology is piquing my interest quite a bit
Ooh.
because they like people who have general knowledge in the law system
Uh
because
huh.
you need to like interview people who've done horrible things and
Yes.
you need to figure out if they're guilty or not. And I quite like that, so I might go into
Mm-hmm.
forensic psychology after this.
Interesting.
We'll see.
It sounds like it's kind of like a roller coaster. Lots of twists, lots of turns, and a lot of time commitment in each of them, right? Like 3 years of law and then a year of experimenting, and boom, we're pivoting over to this hybrid, which sounds like it really fits nicely. It's like a little bit of psych, a little bit of law, boom. How interesting, interesting. So how will you know if you like that? Because you've been very tactical in making these decisions. How are you going to experiment with forensic psychology?
It's weird. Like I don't know if you've studied. I'm pretty sure you
Mm-hmm.
have. I'm not.
Yes, I've
I don't know. What are you currently doing?
well, my journey was also very weird and twisted and turns. So I went to college for an internet a degree. I didn't know what it was, so I went undeclared. Ended up in international relations with a minor in
Oh,
East Asian studies. And while I was there, they gave me a chance to study abroad in China, which was wonderful. And then
oh
after,
wow.
yeah, I've done traveling is something I'm very passionate about. Done a fair bit. And then after that, I went into a startup, a tech startup, and helped them out with client services. We did medical hospital software, like specifically for the education side of things. And then from there, I went
That's
to,
very interesting.
I know, my career was wild. And then I went into finance, worked at a major brokerage company for 2, 3 years. And then I quit to try to start my own different ideas, and now I'm here. That's my
I
current
love
journey.
it.
I know, right? It's
I,
Mhm. Uh,
You know, you're actually like parkouring between totally opposite sort of,
uh-huh.
fields and industries, which is really cool. You're gaining like a lot of life experience in the process.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I think you describe it well, where you're trying all these different things, but when you're 20 and it's like, oh, what career do you want for the rest of your life? It's like, what do you mean? And then but you think you have a good strategy, right? Because there are going to be people who pick a 4-year law degree, get to the end, they're like, wow, that was
Hmm.
terrible. But you're
Yes,
hedging your bets a bit.
exactly.
You're like a little bit of 3. If I have to make it up with 2 more later on, fine, no big deal. Uh, but I like that you're trying your best to navigate a system puts a lot of pressure early on your decision and trying to reduce that pressure. Find your spot. And because like for look at
Exactly.
me, right? I did a 4-year degree in IR and I've done nothing to do with international relations thus far.
It's always the case. Like, everyone I know who studies going to something totally different with their job, which
Hmm.
I hate, because it feels like it really feels like we're in an age where you do get the degree to be able to say you have the degree because
Yep.
people respect that
Uh-huh.
in certain industries. They don't care about the knowledge. They just want to know that you are able to work really hard if someone gives you a lot of work. And
Yeah.
it's just the way society is at the moment.
It
Yeah, I don't like
I
it.
don't like it
Not
either.
really.
It feels like yeah, it's just kind of like buying your ticket to get your foot in the door and you spend
Yes.
4 years, a lot of effort, and I don't, at least in the United States, it costs a lot of money. Does it cost? You're in South
Mhm.
Africa, correct? Does it cost a?
It also costs. It costs a lot, but your loan system and so scares me quite a bit. Like,
Yep.
I don't think
Oh,
ours is as bad as it is in America, but
oh,
it scares the living hell out of me that you guys are like in depth before you even go into
oh
work.
yeah.
It's
It,
really scary for me.
we have problems with our system. It's one of our weak. We have some areas in the United States where industry is great. Education's definitely has a serious issue when it comes to how fast the price has grown to get a degree, just to get your foot in the door for a career you're probably not actually going to have the right degree for in the first place. Like I went to finance,
Mhm.
right? I don't have an accounting background. I went into client services. I don't have a sociology background. I have an IR background, and I quickly found out, unless I'm a diplomat, doesn't really mean a whole lot. But like that's also okay. But it feels weird spending a lot of money just to get a ticket to get a foot in the door somewhere.
Exactly. Like
Hmm.
our thing, well, here it was just a like whole ball of stress because not only do you need to get into uni,
Uh huh.
but like for example, you've got a lot of undergrads doing a 3-year BA degree in whatever,
Yep.
and they all want to do psychology. Now with our weird system, you need to get an honors degree in psychology, which is your fourth one.
Okay.
So normally in abroad, if you get into a degree, you do the whole 4-year thing, you're
Uh huh.
guaranteed a degree. But here you get 3 years, which means nothing. And now you have to apply for the honors one. Now, get this.
Uh huh.
We have a class of more than 500 people in undergrad.
I'm with you.
You only have 36 spots for honors.
What?
Now you've got 400 and something people who cannot get a job. They cannot get into an honors degree anywhere in the world because
Oh.
abroad you only have a 4-year degree. So I didn't get into honors my first year.
Okay.
And essentially I was like, oh well, this is my life now. I have nothing. I
Yep.
started streaming and then I redid some modules, reapplied, and I got in for honors. And now I'm very
Uh
happy
huh.
about that fact, but it's so scary. It's just
Ruthless.
what about all the other
Oh,
people? What are they doing with their lives right now?
that's
Nothing, most likely. They can't
brutal.
practice psychology.
Yeah, like they can't do anything. It's almost like education is just like a hard gateway to like, oh yeah, by the way, all of you people, hundreds of you, yeah, you're out of the system. You can get the B-rate jobs at best because you just weren't happen to be like top 36 in this group of 500 people. Like if you're not top
Exactly.
10%, you're just done. That's an oh, that scares me. That freaks me out because if you get behind, it's so hard to get ahead. Where, for
Hmm.
example, if you're, let's say your parents are college educated, they probably have better jobs. They can probably afford you tutoring if you need it to have better grades. They can get you the resources you need in general to provide a stable work environment for studying. And then if you don't have a degree, you're probably making less money, probably in a less stable place, less food, potentially less resources for education. And you're probably destined to repeat that same cycle over and over with your kids. That's awful.
It's
Wow.
horrible. It's so bad. And the worst part is you can't, well, South Africa now, if
Uh
you
huh.
want to get out of the country and perhaps get a better, get into a better country with a better system,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to because you don't have your 4-year degree. You have 3 years, and that
Yeah.
means nothing unless you
And,
redo your whole first bachelor's degree. That's a different option, of course. They like international students because we
yep.
have to pay a lot more money to study abroad normally, right?
Uh-huh.
And our
Yep.
university does it as well. So in our little class of 36, we have a few international students a lot of the time.
Uh-huh.
So that's even less people in our
You
class
get more
that can
slots.
get an honors
Hmm.
degree. It's scary.
That's awful. Do you know how the system came about? That just seems like such a trap.
It's horrible. Well, the thing is, when you reach your honors degree, you have to do a thesis, well,
Mm-hmm.
like a practice thesis, because you don't
Yes.
actually do research. You do a literary review of other,
Work.
other studies. But
Okay.
now every student needs a supervisor, and essentially there isn't enough supervisors for the amount of students, and
Uh-huh.
that's about it, I guess. It's scary, but it's ironic because we keep talking about the fact that our country doesn't have enough psychologists,
Uh-huh.
and yet we don't have enough spaces to actually make new psychologists. It's a catch-22 situation.
Yeah, you have a bottleneck, right? You need, and also you mentioned not
Mhm.
having enough supervisors, right? You can't just, it's also a problem of, if you say, okay, we're going to allow 250 honor spots, great, you don't have enough people to teach them. The only way to get more people to teach them is, yeah, to make more of them, but to get more, you need more supervisors. Oh gosh, it's awful. It's really a catch-22. Good book, by the way.
Mhm.
But wow, that is a serious bummer. Yeah, I mean, education seems to be a really interesting topic, country to country. At least outside of Europe, I've pretty much heard just problems like, oh, this is an issue, this is an issue. United States has the cost price issue in particular, and then a couple things here or there that some people really like, some people don't like affirmative action. But I think the one thing everyone agrees is
Oh
cost
yeah.
is going up. Wow, that's
Do you have that
Hmm?
abroad, by the way, affirmative action?
Affirmative action. Interesting. So, okay, we're treading in the ground where I'm a little less knowledgeable on, but bear with me. I know domestically there is. I also know schools
Hmm.
have certain degrees where they have the ability to try to create a diverse class. So when it comes to bringing in students abroad, they can have some control. They're like, oh, we'd like to have this group ethnically represented. Now, I do not know what loopholes they have to jump or how they have to phrase it, but that is what happens. Like, my
Yeah.
college struggled with it. The one I went to one I would not have gone to in retrospect, but I got a good education there. But they really struggled with
Where
diversity.
was that?
This was in the middle
Sorry.
of nowhere in Pennsylvania, like truly middle of
Okay.
nowhere. Place called Bucknell University has like 4,000 people, which is small for a U.S. college. And
Yeah.
diversity was a huge struggle there for a lot of reasons. But they definitely went out of their way to. It felt like they were cherry picking certain students and such, just trying to say, oh, we have to have some diversity. But I will
Yeah.
say there was a lot of white people on my campus, and that's
Uh,
it gets messy.
of course, I try never to go into too much detail in our country because
Mhm.
it's because of our history. You can just
Yes,
imagine
it's
it's always a very serious topic to tread on.
yes, that
But
makes
yeah,
sense.
our affirmative action is written into our constitution at this point.
Interesting.
So like you have a class of 36, for example.
Uh huh.
Now you have a set amount of blocks for a certain race, and then you
Interesting.
have another. Now remember, we're the Rainbow Nation, so I know abroad people normally just refer to, uh, well, they refer to like whites and blacks, and that's
Yep.
like the two races. But here we have specifics because we have all different
Uh
kinds of
huh.
races, and so essentially you have to tick all of these boxes and yeah, so it's an interesting system we have, but yeah, affirmative action for us, our government sees it as necessary to,
Yes.
undo the wrongs of the past. But yeah, that
Yes.
also it makes it quite difficult to get into certain fields
Mhm.
and such because
Yep.
yeah, it decreases the amount of spots that are available at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's gotta. It's like a double-edged sword, and that's I think what the tricky part of affirmative action programs are. It's like yes, you're letting in more students, and that's good, right? You have entire groups, and at
Yeah,
least I'm speaking from the United States specifically, large groups of
yeah,
disenfranchised people historically. They do not have a chance and opportunity to build wealth over the long term. They taught, that cycle you referred to when talking about South Africa's education in terms of only
Mm.
you need to get an ed degree to then better up your kids. If you don't get a degree, then you might be left out of the system. That's perpetuated a long time, right? We've had, we still have racially discriminative laws written very carefully to not provoke racial discrimination, but all of that still manifests. Affirmative action is a way to let people into the system. But paradoxically, it's really tough in terms of the competition. Where all of a sudden, if you're competing against racial groups, like, okay, you're realizing there are people, you're getting rejected from potentially a university that you want to go to that could set you up, but people who are having worse grades than you're getting in. And that is the tough part of affirmative action.
Yeah. It's interesting because I never knew it was that prevalent abroad, because again, here I understand why it's being done. The problem is just our government, since apartheid has ended, like our government should have rectified things a lot more drastically, a lot more faster, but instead they didn't really do anything. So now you have this sort of affirmative action going on and on and on, and you're starting to question, but okay, when does this end? You know, when are we going to reach sort of equality without having to have these measures in place? But it's interesting that you have it abroad, because like I said, here we have a different reason we did it, because we want to give people an opportunity who were excluded in the past. But abroad, don't you all simply have the same like starting point, or like,
it's so
or do you not know the reasoning for that?
It exists because the United States. Wow, we instantly onto a deep topic. Let's go for it. I'm enjoying this. So in the United States, we've historically been really bad about it, though you can debate certain aspects of it or not. So I'm of the opinion that we did a bad job so far in trying to rectify the past, where the slavery from the beginning of the American colonies, right, early 1600s, all the way up through 1860s, Reconstruction Act, basically end of a civil war in the United States. Slaves are freed, but then of course a lot of exploitation happens. Then there's a series of a bunch of racist laws that ends up through 1960s. Martin Luther King Jr. Then after that enters a period of, instead of rectifying it, just because the Jim Crow laws are gone, we end separate but equal, which is making basically colored only sections and white only sections for everything, wherein money poured into the white only sections. And then from there,
gosh, it's so similar to us. I never knew this.
Yeah, well, here I'm happy to tell you more, and of course, I'm sure some people in chat will disagree, because then we can fast forward to today, where like 1970s. We had Richard Nixon, who was an absolute racist, hated everybody. He was a vile man. So he's like, okay, we can't go after black people anymore, but I can go after war on drugs, specifically targeting marijuana, because we find that more black people use marijuana. And so what we'll do is we'll make a ton of strict laws around that, so we can target these communities, also target hippies, these more liberal groups, so we can crack down on them too and arrest their leaders, raid their homes, whatever it takes. And we keep fast forwarding. War on drugs is a popular campaign for both sides. We keep those laws in place. We still have really strict marijuana laws, and it helps lead to the highest incarceration rate in the world per capita. United States gets to boast that one. And then we fast forward to today, and I can talk about an issue right now, which is we're talking about something called critical race theory. That's becoming a topic, which is how do you teach the history of the United States, this huge history, to kids? And the United States is also, even though we are one nation, we're very good at coming together when there's one threat. It's not a threat, we'll fight each other all day. And then it comes to the question is, how do you teach this history? And some groups say, let's not focus on the race and the racial aspects of the United States, because it might divide us further. And another group say, hey, look, this is our history. Let's teach it as such, teach this aspect that lots of minority groups had to suffer, like not just African Americans, obviously under slavery and Jim Crow laws. And you have like things like the Chinese Expulsion Act in the 1880s. You have Japanese internment camps where in World War II, United States locked up Japanese Americans because they might be a spy, even if they're totally innocent and Americans. Then the other says like let's teach all that and teach it and like really ingrain it, because this is a huge part of the system. And the answer is we still argue about this today. We have not done some like giant big sweep to fix everything per se. Yeah, so I don't know if it's going to hold for every country. Like I would imagine European countries did not have slavery as present on the continent compared to the colonies, United States and other ones. But in the United States, yes, there has been a lot of racial tension and hundreds of years of it. And it does continue to this day, and trying to see how much, what can you do to improve the situation? What is excessive? What is necessary? What is fair? What's unfair? Like those questions persist every day. You can check the news right now and find it. USA.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that was a huge history
yeah,
lesson. Sorry about that.
yeah, thank you for that. I mean, like again, it's the same with. I just realized right now how I wouldn't call it ignorance, but the lack of knowledge I have regarding American history
Uh-huh.
is quite interesting because we're not taught your history here, just as you're not taught ours, except for apartheid.
Yes.
Everyone knows about apartheid.
We know about apartheid, but to be
But
honest, I don't know their full story.
yeah,
Like in South
uh,
Africa, that's the tough part, right? It's kind of irony. And there's an irony to it of like learning from each other's history, but yet I don't know your history, but you're still. I didn't even know you had affirmative action until this call. I was just bluffing my
it's
way through it.
very big.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So
Yeah,
yeah.
don't worry, we all fake it till we make it. Just never say it out loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, our affirmative action is very serious because it's in the thing is our government fails to actually provide jobs, provide education, give people housing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about people who have been previously disadvantaged. And I mean, we want that. We want them to be helped, but instead our government sort of lays back. They don't really fulfill their promises. So they take the easy way out. So instead of creating an equal starting point,
Mm-hmm.
they create an equal outcome. So
Yes.
that's where affirmative action comes in. Now, I get that, but the problem is you're not helping these people from the get-go. You need
Yes.
to give them housing, you need to give them appropriate
Mm-hmm.
schooling. But yeah, so the fact that okay, so your starting point is slavery. I can see that now, and
Yes.
you explained how the laws went into, what do you call it? Appropriating that for a long time. And it's very
Mm-hmm.
interesting the way your government handled marijuana because recently we had the same thing in South Africa. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was studying law. We were following this case because this white couple, ironically, they got caught for smoking marijuana in their own home.
Uh-huh.
And they went on and they made a big, big, big lawsuit where they challenged our constitution and they said, listen, the
Mm-hmm.
reason you guys don't want people to smoke marijuana
Mm-hmm.
is mostly because you're targeting people of other nationalities. And that's
Mm-hmm.
against our constitution because, of course, we have
Interesting.
the right to culture, the right to religion. And they said, well, a lot of people in our country actually use this because it's part of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they won. They won the
Wow.
big, big, big lawsuit. And now marijuana is illegal to smoke in your own homes in South Africa since something around 2018. So
Wow.
interestingly enough, we managed to change the constitution. But hey, I know some states in America did the
Mm-hmm.
same
Yeah,
recently,
we're
but
we're we're
not the
having slow.
entirety yet.
It's so interesting. So, first, this is such a cool conversation. Second, yeah, the United States is slowly rolling it out. Now, on a federal level, ironically, even though Democrats have a lot of power right now, it's a more liberal party versus the Republican Party, which is conservative ones. A lot of the key Democrats actually had a hand in passing these drug laws historically. Therefore, there's not been a lot of change on the federal level, but on the state level, like if I look at the 2020 election, different amendments to constitutions and propositions are put up on a state level. And every one that made drugs more liberal that went on the ballot was elected state by state in both conservative and liberal states. Like across the board, there is a slow, steady shift to move towards a more liberal view, which is great, whether you take it from the racism perspective or even just like a libertarianism perspective of people should be able to do what they want with their bodies. Like, that's cool. Do we need regulation
Yeah,
there? Or free market
no,
perspective.
unless
Take
it
it. Mm-hmm.
hurts someone else. It's
Mm-hmm.
like alcohol laws. Like don't drive if you're intoxicated, but you can
Yes.
drink alcohol. The same
Yes.
with marijuana. If you want, I know my favorite countries, and I'm not sure which. I'm not gonna name a random country because I'm gonna get it off. But where they legalize all drug use, but
Uh-huh.
you have to go to a pharmaceutical company.
Mm-hmm.
You have to see a therapist almost every time you're there. They will give you it in its most purest form, so
Interesting.
there's nothing in it that's not supposed to be in it, like pesticide.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep an eye on these people who would have gotten it anyway through the black
Yes.
market. And I mean, those countries are doing so well. And
Yes.
it's just, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to take all these drugs that are really bad for you, but people will, and at least do it through a regulated system. I
Mm-hmm.
can go forever on about the black market because we always had this thing with rhino horn in our country. I don't know
Mm.
if you know about like all the rhinos
Hunting
being
the
poached in
horns.
South Africa.
Yeah.
taken to China for
Traditional medicine.
increasing
Hmm.
increasing libido, mostly. But
Interesting.
yeah, so we started thinking, well, they're going to do it illegally and kill the rhinos. Why don't we just start cutting off rhino horns? Because
Uh-huh.
it's like a fingernail, it doesn't hurt.
Yep.
So people can't kill the rhino, and then we just put it into the market and sell it legally.
Yep.
And some farmers have done that, not a
Nice.
lot. But I like that
Hmm.
idea because the moment you take it out of the black market, you just regulate it much
Hmm.
more carefully and safely, and it's sort of a win-win situation at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling as we talk about different issues, I think we're gonna be on the same page on a lot because I agree. I think, ironically, in the United States, we go back to drugs. The war on drugs, the demand for drugs did not change. Prices went up, and it hurt other countries that violence could be used to seize enough farms and production means to produce the drugs and smuggle them in. But instead of trying to focus on a help the people that are using them by giving them access to it at a reasonable price at a safe place and giving them the resources to better themselves ideally and potentially wean off of them, you can completely stop or heavily reduce the violence associated with drugs. You can increase the safety of it. There are better approaches than trying to take a punish the user that actually can help your society out and benefit. But it is, I think, historically look at like the 1980s, 1990s, 1970s in the USA, that it was really popular to say we're gonna crack down on drug use because these people are out of control, instead of saying these people need help. But we go back to 1970s, Nixon and his motivations, and he didn't care about the drugs. He wasn't there for the drugs. He was there for worse reasons. Um,
Mm,
yeah.
exactly. It's I mean, it's really about the people using the drugs, right? It's not a problem that often, especially with marijuana. I mean, so many studies have gone into that by now,
Uh huh.
showing the benefits of it. But I know you guys do have medical marijuana there, which is an interesting one. I don't think we ever had that before we legalized marijuana.
Uh huh.
You can get that for just about anything, right? You have
Yes,
anxiety,
it
you
is.
get marijuana. You have a back pain, you get marijuana. It's
Yeah,
sort
there.
of a loophole
Uh
I've
huh.
realized that some places in America has.
Yeah, my favorite loophole, I don't know if it's still there, is in DC, where what you would do is it was legal to have marijuana. It was illegal to sell marijuana. It was legal, though, to give people marijuana. So what stores would do is they would be willing to
Oh.
sell you a $10 bag of chips. And with it came a little bear of marijuana as a gift. Because it wasn't
Oh
legal for them to
no.
sell it, but you could buy a really expensive snack that happened to come with a gift of marijuana. And that is how our nation's capital dealt with it. It was.
That's so ironic. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
have the right currently to have marijuana in our homes, but you can't sell it, you
Mm-hmm.
cannot buy it. But
Interesting.
somehow you get this into your home. So let's just put it
Ooh.
like that. There's still a big loophole in our system as well.
Yep.
So the marijuana isn't magically going to grow from my garden.
Uh-huh.
It's you have to buy it from someplace first.
Right. It's a kind of a paradox there of like, oh yeah, everyone has this. Where are they getting it from? But I always feel like that's such a failing on government policy. It's like, okay, everyone's buying it illegally. Why not buy it legally, have it safer, and tax it? Like the latter seems so much better than the former. But governments, I don't know about South Africa's government, but I know my government is full of very old people, and very old people are very happy with older ways and being reluctant to change things on both parties. Ah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, our government is
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's very corrupt and it's a very
Mhm.
bad government. Our law system on the other hand is impeccable. It's based
Interesting.
on Roman and Dutch law, but I mean, I have unfortunately learned that what's in the textbook isn't necessarily going to apply to real life because
Mhm.
you have to get the criminal into the court system before you can apply the law,
Mhm.
and
That makes sense.
our crime is just rampant, so that doesn't happen. So unless, and of course there's corruption in the law as well every now and then, the
Mhm.
government has a bit of a say there,
Yep.
bit of sneaky ways to influence the
Yeah.
law.
Tip the
But
scale. Mhm.
yeah, it's a problem. That's the reason I won't be practicing law in South Africa. That's
Interesting.
mainly the reason.
You know,
I
on.
wanted to know my laws though, because it's very important to know what you're allowed to do in this country and what you're not allowed to
Mhm.
do. You don't want to end up on the wrong side of the law in South Africa.
Yeah, that makes. Yeah, especially with a little bit of corruption here or there. Would you ever want to leave the country? You mentioned you gave up the opportunity
Yes.
to study abroad. Yes is the answer. Resounding yes. Wait.
Yes.
So tell me the motivations for potentially wanting to leave, and where would you want to go?
Okay, so motivation. It's clear our country is not getting better. From let's put it from a social perspective, I'd say we're making big improvements. Like
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to racial tension, I mean, it's we've moved bounds away from where we were. It's like the people are great.
Mm-hmm.
It's the government is failing our country, so our infrastructure is worsening. Like we have regular power outages called load shedding, where we
Mm.
make turns to have power because there's not
Okay.
enough to go around because the
Mm-hmm.
generators aren't maintained. So I mean, I now have a UPS installed in my house. I
Uh-huh.
had to use my Twitch scraps to get that into the house to keep my PC running when I'm streaming.
Okay.
And yeah, I also talked about Day Zero the other day on my channel, and people were so shocked. It's I don't know if you've heard
I
about
haven't,
Day
but I'm
Zero,
very
but
excited to hear.
we
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, Day Zero. It sounds like a horror movie. It was the day South Africa was going. Well, Cape Town.
Okay.
Cape Town was the first major city in the world that was going to run out of water,
Whoa.
and that
That's
is a big
serious.
big no-no in my books for survival. But
Yep.
the thing is, what happened was we had our worst drought in years, and it sort of built up to a point where our dams were
Okay.
running dry.
Yep.
And now the thing is, our country was well aware of this happening, and they didn't do the necessary precautionary steps to save up in time. So
Hmm.
that is where our government failed us. It's not just global warming. So we were counting off the days. We had a set time.
So
They
you ran.
calculated it, and when we reached day zero, there would be no more water.
That's
And
terrifying. Holy cow.
yeah, so it was, and we were saving up water. Like there was no water in the stores to buy. I remember we were
Yep.
hoping they would bring in water because everyone was like starting to
Fine.
stock up on
Yep.
like 25-liter bottles, including me.
Yep.
And
Makes
you
sense.
were only allowed to use like what 5 liters a person per household, which is not enough.
Yep.
Otherwise, the government would come and they would close your
The,
what do you call it? There's something like
the
a
pipe.
tap outside they can
Okay.
manipulate, so you can only get a certain amount of water through. So that was something. And it's all these
Mm-hmm.
little things because it's in the most primal form, right? I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking
Yeah.
about pure survival. It's
100%.
not safe in South Africa really. It's you don't even have electricity when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these little things you can't rely on. And now like do you really want to raise a child in this country,
Yep.
if you can't even ensure that they'll have, electricity in the night.
Yep.
It's just not a viable long-term solution. So the
Mm-hmm.
idea is to get out and to seek a
Uh-huh.
country that perhaps provides a little bit more certainty in the long run, I'd say.
All right, that makes sense. That sounds tough. It's like a really shaky pyramid where it's like, okay, hey, here's our country, but here's all the entire foundation has all these cracks. We mismanaged our ability. We saw day zero was coming. We didn't prepare properly for it. We have all these water limitations as a result. Like electricity is unstable. Now, in your case, what's cool? I think it's cool. Aside that your Twitch was able to help you fund the power unit, so it can keep the business going. But you have all these little cracks here, there, and that is, I don't blame you for sitting there saying, okay, do I want to raise a kid in this country? When while we're making progress socially, I'm not sure about all this other stuff and whether we can, as a country, make progress forward, particularly if a corrupt government that seems to be mismanaging things. Have you considered what countries you'd want to go to?
Yeah, so with regards to the degree thing, like one step
Mm-hmm.
at a time. So I'm thinking that's the reason I needed to do my honors
Uh
because
huh. You need a
I
way
can
out.
only study abroad once that's done. And
Yep.
now when that's done, I will be applying all over the world. I would have started off with America.
Uh huh.
It was always my dream to go to America, but again, we're being fed just like little snippets of your media, and
Yep.
I think it's just for scare tactics. But all we know is Trump versus Hillary, and there's civil war, and the whole place is in flames, and
Okay.
that's all we hear. So I picture a country in flames, though I know that's not the case. I know you probably have a very normal country
Uh
with
huh.
just sort of minority groups fighting with each other, I'm hoping.
Well.
But since
Uh huh.
then, I've decided to go to Toronto, Canada for now instead.
Ah. You know what? I'm not even gonna bother fighting. It is not a country in flames. We have problems just like any country, but to be honest, Toronto, Canada is
I
also very
thought so.
nice. So Yeah, you can do fine in either country, but that's so funny. I love the idea of just the idea, like looking out my window, it's just fire everywhere. No, it's we all fight amongst
Yes.
each we fight amongst each other politically, but for the most part, it's pretty chill. A couple of
It's the
protests
media,
here or
man.
there.
The
And
media is screwed up.
media is a really interesting thing. Do you have in South Africa like inflammatory media? Because one thing that's been going on in the United States over time, it's been growing. The media seems to be very good at dividing people and saying like
Oh
this
yeah.
is our way, everyone else is bad. Which of course
Mm.
it's a dangerous cycle that people want to watch that kind of media. That media isn't given to them, which helps fuel their initial belief to want to like have this inflammatory aspect. Keep on going and going and going. Does that tell me about that in South Africa? Is that a trend there too, or it is? Okay.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's oh gosh. There was this funny thing. No, how can I put this? There's so much bad things happening in our country. The media doesn't even have to try. It's just every day. It's like, okay, this amount of people got killed here. This is what the government did recently and how they screwed up. It's almost there doesn't even
Mm.
have to be an agenda. It's just so bad.
Ouch.
What I
Interesting.
wanted to say was I know a Sealy. You know Sealy. She's obviously a Gwent
Mm-hmm.
streamer. She was going into something also almost like forensics. I can't recall,
Mm-hmm.
but she said the worst crime, unsolved mystery, was in her country was when like a group of friends went out and camped in a park, and
Mm-hmm.
then they got stabbed to death. And I'm thinking that's just a day at the beach here in SA.
Yeah, that is
That's nothing. It
no.
happens every day in hundreds. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a bit scary, but no, the problem here isn't the media, it's the government. So what
Yep.
they do is they try to create racial tension 24/7 because when, both groups think the other group is the problem, none of them focus on the government who's
Mm-hmm.
actually not helping the country get any better with tax money.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have groups pointing fingers at each other and saying, "Well, look what happened so many years ago. That's the
Uh-huh.
reason this is happening." And the real
Mm-hmm.
thing is the government is in control and they need
Of
to fix
everything.
it. And they have the taxes to do it. But you had our last president, President Jacob Zuma. He built this whole homestead. What was it called? Nkandla. It costed more than 50 million rand to build,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, he doesn't get paid 50 million
Yep, that
rand
sounds
to do his
expensive.
job.
Yep.
And that's where all our money goes, which is infuriating because you see all these suffering and there's nothing you can do about it because you're already doing your share with taxes. You can donate to charity.
Mm-hmm.
You have no guarantee that the money's going to end up where they say it's going to end up. And
Right.
yeah, the funniest thing for me was when President Trump,
Mm-hmm.
back when he was still president, he cut the funds he sent to South Africa. And I think he was sending something like, gosh, I don't know. It was something like $1 billion.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's too much. It might have been a little bit less. And he said, well, he's not going to send us much money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, what money?
Uh-huh.
What money? Are we getting money? Because we're not
Uh-huh.
seeing any of that money. We
No.
didn't even know this was a thing. The government just takes it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, USA is pretty generous, not super generous relative to the amount of money we bring in, but foreign aid policy is not so much, I would say, as an opinion, about, hey, let's help a country, as much as it is, hey, let's buy a country's government. Let's make sure that if something went wrong and we needed to have a friend in Africa, like South Africa would be there. So
Mm.
I will say when it comes to foreign aid policy, now sometimes it gets a little stricter, but it's about giving it and making sure that when ships are down, you're gonna help us out if we need to like park a navy nearby or something. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
sad though that it doesn't go to a more productive means. Some nations do put it to good use, but it is like
Mm.
a not so subtle. Oh yeah, here have $1 billion, be friends, and then yeah, we'll work from there. But that
Oh
is
yeah, we'll be friends with anyone. You just give us some money, and yeah, our big
yeah,
controversy the last 2 years was with the Gupta family.
okay.
And the family was a very rich Indian family, the Guptas,
Mhm.
and they were close with our president, and they started implementing things here in our country, and started buying certain parts of it. And the problem is we eagerly sell it again because we're corrupt. Same
Okay.
with Chinese. We have a lot of Chinese people coming in and buying certain, sectors. And the thing
Hmm.
is, we can't buy that back.
Yep.
And, it's not good giving parts of your country over to a different country because they steadily get more control and get,
Yes.
do more decisions that only benefit
Hmm.
their citizens. And our government just allows it because, again, they
They're
don't really
pocketing
care.
it.
So
Right.
yeah, that was a big controversy. The Guptas coming in here in South Africa and buying things.
Yeah, see, that's rough because in the United States right now we're able to do the opposite because in China Huawei is producing I think some of the best technology in the world, but because they're so close to Chinese government, United States pushing pressure on all of its allies and themselves, we're banning it. We even recently banned I think the purchasing of our Huawei stock among other companies as well. So we're in the United States, we're able to crack down and be like going as far as to say we want nothing to do with certain companies or people that just like you will not have anything here, or and we'll put pressure on our allies to not do it. But when a government is if a government isn't for the people or the country to some extent, the United States, one thing that's nice is we do have self-interested people, but for the most part, even though we're all at each other's throats, we are all trying to make the country as good as we can, and even on the government level.
Yeah.
But that's tough
Mm.
when you have a government that is purely not for the people; it's purely for themselves, and they're like, "Oh well, everyone, we don't have a country in 50 years, but I got a yacht, I got a couple cars, I got a couple mansions. Like, it's a good trade. That's horrible. So I don't blame you
It
for
is,
being
right?
interesting and leaving.
It is.
Hmm.
It's you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, who ends up in the government, it's normally people who seek power and it's really for the right reasons.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things, right? But you mentioned something along the lines of America banning certain companies. What are your thoughts on the Chinese government recently banning cryptocurrencies?
Ooh, that's so interesting because it was one of the topics we both know a bit about, and I actually see the one person in glance at chat. I saw a name fly by. I know I have one person in chat who loves crypto. So they're probably going to enjoy this one. But for banning it, it's so interesting because I always thought cryptocurrency represented, I thought, one of the bigger threats to governmental power. But
Hmm.
as a utility, like as a object of with use, as opposed to an investment. So here's why I think people. So like I get why they're nervous about it. Am I happy they banned it? No. I would like to look at the reasons though, because they were some of the biggest mining operation by country in the world was in China. And for people who don't know anything about cryptocurrency, mining just means think of it as like the biggest amount of people keeping track of the systems and trying to generate money from cryptocurrency by creating new crypto. So their banning of it locks down that, makes the investment side of it plummet. But I get it from a government perspective of I can't control the transactions. I can't do it anymore. And so just ban it. Get rid of it. I don't like it personally. I do understand why China's conceptually doing it, and they might have other reasons as well. What did you think about it?
Okay, well, I'm obviously a big crypto fan, and
Yes.
it hurt my crypto wallet. Let's put it like that, because all the income I made this year just fell right back to square one. But I'm still in the green, because I invested earlier than 2021.
Smart.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, you need regulation, right? And I think there's a lot, like our government as well wants to start regulating cryptocurrency, but it's so
Uh-huh.
difficult to do, right? Because it's totally independent of government policy.
Yes.
You can just, you can send money from one wallet to another and the government doesn't need to know about it.
Yep.
You can evade taxes in wonderful ways and
Uh-huh.
it has the potential for a lot of criminal activity, which obviously isn't something your government would like.
Yes.
But I'm just afraid the government begins to regulate it in such a way that
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not a viable option anymore. Because I think our government, I can't recall if it's ours, but said something along the lines of they'll look at your profit you made
Uh-huh.
in your wallet and they'll tax you on it. Now the
Yes.
conundrum there is you don't necessarily keep that profit. It could disappear overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They should instead tax all the money you take out and put back in your bank account and call that profit instead. I can get behind that, of course, because you
Yes.
did make an income. But it's difficult. It's certainly difficult.
Yeah, I think like in a level of like in the United States, they do tax the realized gains, and that means I bought crypto. Let's say I bought a Bitcoin at $100 for simple math. Of course, it's way more than that now. Bought over 100, and I sell it at 200. The different providers for wallets that help try to keep track of this, the exchanges, will say, "Oh, you made $100. Here's a tax form. Go report it to the government." But that is because you sold at a higher price you bought at. So but if they're just taking snapshots of it, your unrealized gains, like that's tough. There's a distinct difference, at least in the American finance system, of it's unrealized, we haven't sold it. It might go up, might go down. I'm not going to try to force you to sell part of it. Versus, I've sold it, it's cash. I know I've made money. They'll tax part of the money I made. But that's also I think an interesting point about governments almost putting barriers in investing. They're saying like, look, if you're gonna do, we don't want you to do crypto, so we're gonna give it a really aggressive tax law. In the United States, they're treating it just like an investable asset right now. But
Hmm.
if they're, I don't know which countries are gonna consider doing that, but that makes it a much harsher investment if they're just taxing on unrealized gains.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean it's very much like stocks. I
Uh-huh.
see no reason why it should be a sort of shady underdog thing. Like it's I don't know. I feel like it should be a viable option. I've thought it
Uh-huh.
would be the future. In all honesty, we already had ATMs here set up where you could pay with Bitcoin, and I thought that was just amazing. But and now with like an entire like China just not doing it anymore, that's
Mm-hmm.
a large portion of the world's population not being able to invest in crypto anymore, which
Yep.
obviously has a big effect on the market. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Tough.
I definitely am a little bit more hesitant when
Uh-huh.
investing in crypto right now, as I'm not sure where it's heading.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it took a big drop after that and Elon Musk's tweet,
Yep.
because he just does that on purpose at
Oh
this
yeah,
point.
he's pump and dumping
I
that.
don't know if he's
Mm-hmm.
attempting to, sell all of his crypto and then invest
Oh
again
yeah.
and trying to
Oh
sort of
yeah.
influence the market, or if he's just being Elon. But yeah, it has a big effect
Uh-huh.
on Dogcoin, at least. Let's put
Yeah.
it like that.
Yeah, Dogecoin has been an interesting one because it's supposed to be a joke, right? A coin called like a virtual currency called Dogecoin. Like, let's be real. But had that fanaticism around it that drove it up. For me, the thing I'm looking at when it comes to crypto is I prefer investing in things that have a rate of return. So if I buy a stock, I'm buying a company full of people whose job is now to make me money. I like that. I like stocks are usually my bread and butter, but like real estate has, I can rent out space. I or sell it at a higher price later on. I think things like bonds, which are basically loans to other institutions, companies, they pay me interest. I like that. Thing for crypto that always makes me pause is if I buy a Bitcoin, I'm counting on somebody else wanting that Bitcoin and willing to pay more for it than I bought
Hmm.
it originally at. So what I'm waiting for with crypto is when the utility is so high that it just starts dwarfing currencies. Like Bitcoin going from like 60,000 to 30,000, 30,000, tripping over my words. But that volatility indicates to me that this is an investment. People are treating it like a bit of a hot potato game. But I'm waiting when you say
Hmm.
like Bitcoin ATMs, that's the stuff that excites me. Like here we go. Now we're talking about a currency that's starting to make it mainstream. That I might go buy my groceries with. Might go buy something online with.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. Have you seen more of
Hmm.
that as time has gone on? More opportunities for like the utility side of crypto?
Well, it was heading that way when Bitcoin was reaching its all-time high.
Uh
I'm
huh.
not sure in dollar what it was worth, but here in rand, we were on our way to 1 million rand, and that
That's
was going to be
insane.
very big.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but then it fell, and now nobody's speaking about it anymore. Which is again scaring me. I'm hoping it
Mm-hmm.
gets back to where it was after this big sort of the bubble burst. Essentially, it was a big knock
Mm-hmm.
to all the coins actually, but. Yeah, right now I can't see it becoming mainstream. Not after that. So we're gonna have to wait a while for it to settle and stabilize again. Because, like you said, it's very volatile, and people. There's a lot of newer generations who get involved in these sort of things, but
Okay.
the older generations are still a bit hesitant,
Mm-hmm.
and they only start investing when when they see headliners saying Bitcoin is reaching one
Yep.
million rand, and then all
Mm.
of them suddenly want to get involved. Um, but yeah, I think we'll be waiting a good while before we can do that. I mean, Elon
Yes.
was saying you could buy like Teslas with Dogcoin at
Uh
some
huh.
point, and now he just retracted all of that, I believe, which
Mm-hmm.
is funny. It's a bit funny.
Yeah, I think there is the best part about cryptocurrency in many ways it's unregulated. The worst part is all the things we ended up regulating investing for to prevent exploitation rampant in crypto. So if you're going in the, I feel if you just say I'm gonna bet my whole future on crypto, that's a dangerous bet. There's a lot of cryptos out there and a lot of shady
Yeah.
things going on. At the same time, you're saying, I'm interested in this. Like that makes a lot of sense. Here's a even if I take it for me, I don't really view it as an investment, but it is a huge opportunity to cut down on just transactional costs. So,
Hmm.
right, if I do an trade of somebody, I need to have a third party verified, a credit card company typically, make sure that this transaction goes through, but they're picking up a fee. Crypto, if I just dump it into a corporate wallet, all of a sudden I have no extra fee. Maybe they'll pass those savings to me. Everything's 2% cheaper, 3% cheaper. Ooh, that sounds interesting. So I can't wait for the utility side of things to grow out. But I don't know which crypto is going to be the winner. It needs to be good at transactions, anonymous, and also very cheap to mine, not minimal environmental damage as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, the environment thing I haven't read up on too much. I
Uh huh.
just assume that most mining takes up an incredible amount of energy.
Yep, 100%.
It would
That's
be
it.
interesting knowing which coin is the most environmentally friendly because
Yes.
I have no idea.
I don't know either offhand, I'll be honest, but that is a huge factor in I think the future. Whatever
Mhm.
one takes up the least amount of electricity to keep track of all the transactions, that's going to be the winner. Or at least potentially one of the factors that'll probably help that one win in the end. Oh, it's so cool.
I would hope so, right? I would
Yeah.
hope so. It's so interesting if you try to describe mining to the average person. It's a weird concept that you can mine coins.
Hmm.
Obviously I'd never do it. I just don't have the processing power in my PC to really get anything out of it for the amount of electricity you'd have to use.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was thinking that Bitcoin was going to be the standard currency, and then you have Ethereum, a close
Interesting.
second. Ethereum doing
Yep.
very well at the moment. Um, yeah, I was very angry at myself because back when Ethereum was like 1,000 rand, I had like, 40, 50 of it, and then nothing happened. I took it out. Now I have 4 Ethereum, and that already is like 130,000 rand, and I always
Wow.
regret it, because I always take it out just too soon.
Hmm.
But then you have Litecoin, and then fourth you have Ripple. Now
Uh-huh.
Ripple was an interesting one because at first it was only a few rand, so it would have been something like $1 maybe,
Yep.
and then they were taken to court because people said, well, it's not a real
Uh-huh.
cryptocurrency because you're more like a bank. You have a it's easier to manipulate this, and it's this big thing in court. But it seems like Ripple might just win, and if that happens, I think Ripple
Hmm.
will skyrocket. So I still have a few
Yep.
hundred Ripple as it's not worth a lot right now. But if it becomes something, it's
Hmm.
like an investment, and if it doesn't pay off, it doesn't pay off. But don't put all of
Yep.
your life savings in it. Be
Yes.
careful. It's you always have to have a little bit in the bank and just keep it safe.
Yeah, I think I would agree with your words of wisdom there of look, if you want to play the game of crypto, go for it. There is a nature of hot potato to it, but at the same time, it really well could be the future, trying to figure out which one it will be. And a lot of people have made some money on it. On the other hand, though, also just as volatile, right? If Ripple, let's say, for example, did poorly in courts around the world, all of a sudden things could get messy, or the government changes tax codes around
Hmm.
crypto. Don't be all in on the crypto. Doesn't mean you can't have a finger or two in it, but you want to sit there and say, okay, if all the cryptocurrencies started to go downhill in a massive fall, which it did a couple months ago, I want to make sure I have my stocks. I own companies that will make me money. I have some money in the bank for emergencies. I have a whole portfolio. So
That's
mhm,
great.
that's
You know
also
your stuff, and it's very good. I still need to get involved in stocks. That's the one
uh huh.
thing I have not yet done. That always seemed like an adult game to me, and I still feel deep down like I'm
Hmm.
16 and I need to be careful with my little bit of money.
Uh huh.
And when I heard of cryptocurrencies, it was just so accessible because I could now use an app. Like
Hmm.
I know my family, they got wallets, and
Yep.
that's also a different way
Interesting.
to do it. But I just got a South African app that was very reliable, and they gave you the top 4 cryptocurrencies, and I could use my bank account, just send it over, and it was safe. And
Yep.
I like that. I like the fact that it's hopefully doesn't get hacked or something.
Uh
But
huh.
I've got my password. It's written in the book. It's put in a
Uh
safe
huh.
place. And yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon because the court system also needs to adjust. if someone dies without a
Mm-hmm.
will, you have a certain way of distributing their possessions, and we
Yes.
have more old people dying
Mm-hmm.
with cryptocurrencies, and
Wow.
people can't find the passwords, and families can't access the money, which is a big
Mm.
deal. And I got
Interesting.
my grandparents involved in crypto,
Okay.
and yeah, so if they lose all their money, I essentially will lose some of my inheritance one day, but hopefully that doesn't happen. But
Hopefully,
I help
big
them very
plans.
carefully, invested in, yeah, just the safest cryptocurrencies, a little bit of the money, and I made sure we got the password,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, down, and we put it in a very secure place, because if something happens to them, you need to be able to
Mm-hmm.
access this. And again, the
Yes.
government doesn't know. That's the problem, right? Because you won't be paying tax on that,
Mm-hmm.
and you should, but you just transport it from one wallet to another, and
Yep.
it's as easy as that, right?
Yep. I'm with you. I'm with you. It's so interesting. So you mentioned that you not only have your grandparents on this, but like your parents just got wallets. Is that true? Is that
Mhm.
common in South Africa? That like a lot of people have
Uh,
them? Or is it just that you introduced
mm,
everybody?
I'm introducing everyone.
Interesting. And do they?
No,
Mm-hmm. Do your parents
yeah,
like
no.
it? Mhm.
Do my parents like crypto?
Yeah. Like, you've got your grandparents in there, you got your parents in this. Like, this is for me the tipping point, right? This is what has to happen for crypto to start destroying financial institutions. Because why would you use a credit card if you get 2%, 3% back from using
Mm-hmm.
crypto to cut them out of the deal? Same with using a bank. Like, if you're cutting these out, it's fascinating. And so if your parents are starting to use it in transactions like that is a generational jump that catches my eye.
Mm-hmm.
So are your parents liking to it? Are they taking to it? Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, normally
Really?
people are extremely judgmental of these things, and I get that. I was too. Because it's a psychological phenomenon. It's, what is it called again? I always forget this term. It's I remember, and I'll let you know. But it's, you either hate something or you love it. There isn't an
Mm-hmm.
in between, because your brain needs to justify the reason you're not doing a certain thing, and it often struggles to do that. So you end up either hating it or loving it, because again, you need to justify where you're missing out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I initially hated it as well, for no reason. I just
Yep.
hated it because my cousin was making so much money, and I just thought, this isn't a viable thing. This shouldn't be a
Uh-huh.
thing at all. And then later, I got convinced, and I got a Luno, the app we use in South Africa, and I invested 1,000 rand, which is
Mm-hmm.
about like $80, and I just let it sit, and I watched it grow just a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, it's viable enough to actually, I showed my mother, and I said, look, I just put in this little amount of money. If I lose it, it's all right. But look, it's growing. And
Mm-hmm.
if I had this amount of money in, it would have grown by this much. And it's quite stable. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
drops, but it grows again, and it drops and it grows,
Yep.
and exponentially gets a lot more. So we both put in money, and at some point we've put in, well, I have most of my savings in crypto because I'm young and I
Ooh.
can
Okay.
afford to experiment a bit. But she put a large chunk of her savings in, not that much,
Uh-huh.
it's not even half of what she has, but my mom has made enough now to, like, it's a serious, like, it's like winning the lottery, a small
Mm-hmm.
lottery, but
Yep.
winning the lottery nevertheless. Like the UPS I have in my garage, damn, that costed so much. It I needed it for casting for CDPR, but I
Uh-huh.
couldn't tell anybody why, because it was too early, and I signed a contract stating I couldn't talk about things.
Yep.
But it costed about trying to think now, was it it wasn't $200, it was more like $2,000. Yep, $2,000. And I bought that all with profits I made off
Wow.
of my initial savings from Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's amazing. And yeah, it's very volatile, but like with Ripple, I put half of my savings into it, and nothing happens for weeks, and then one weekend it just triples for no
Mm-hmm.
reason, and you quickly take out all your money. And I mean, no bank does that,
Yep.
you know it's not normally that volatile, that it does the opposite where it just decreases. That's
Uh-huh.
normally when the bubble bursts, and then you have to wait a few months before it gets back to where it was. But it's yeah, so that's how I got my whole family hooked. And I mean, none of
Wow.
us have lost money yet. We're all in the green, and you just have to be careful, and you need to wait it out if it falls, because you never take your money out on a loss. That's
Yep.
like the biggest rule. And people panic, and that's how they lose all their savings.
Interesting, interesting. You have nerves of steel because lots of people. When I was in the finance industry, I worked in a call center. So if you had a question or a complaint, and then eventually I specialized in retirement, but you call in. As soon as COVID hit, for example, I worked the phones, and you get the call, and it's like, oh my gosh, all my money's going down. Sell everything, and I have to be there. It's like,
Yeah.
so I can't advise you, but do you want to talk about your emotional state right now and whether you're like ready to invest and make investment decisions? It sounds like you've got that cool head. You're looking at crypto, which is oftentimes, like, generally speaking, much more volatile than stocks. And you're sitting there like, oh yeah, went down 20%. Please, it's a Tuesday. It'll be back in 3 months. Just wait it out. I give you a lot of credit. That is the right kind of financial mentality, keeping a cool head, making the rational decisions for your situation. A lot of credit there.
Thank you. But it came from hard lessons, let's put it like that. And
Uh-huh.
again, I started off with a very little amount of money. So I had nothing to lose really. And I did have a mentality at some point where you can see it dropping. And you know, you can see people putting orders in and it's all in the red and it is dropping. And immediately you go into panic mode and you quickly want to sell because your
Uh-huh.
logic is, well, it's going to drop more. I'd rather sell now and then buy later.
Yep.
And then I do that and then immediately it just starts rising again for no reason at all. And then I quickly buy and then it starts dropping. So like that, I've made like a little loss, but it
Mm-hmm.
was enough of a lesson to know when that happens and you have a large amount of money in it, which I now have because it's all my savings, you don't touch
Mm-hmm.
it. It will go back unless we have a sort of apocalypse in crypto and it
Mm-hmm.
just vanishes. You should be fine. It will always go back to where it was eventually, unless you're
Mm-hmm.
playing with small coins, of course. If you're
Yes.
playing with altcoins, that's a totally different story. It's like
Yes.
you don't know Dogcoin is going to go back. It might never go back. You need to
Yes.
be careful, but it's high risk, high reward. My goodness, it's
Interesting.
incredible.
It's
Like,
not. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's amazing.
I think it's so interesting because I've crypto's not the one I flirted with, but I remember when I'm definitely more of the stock type of person where
Mm.
I remember when GME was spiking up and then it started to fall. It went up like 300, fell down to I think $90, and at that point I wanted to go back up because I enjoyed watching a hedge fund be on the losing end of the trade. If GameStop, this company right on the edge of bankruptcy, stayed in it and the stock price was high, this hedge fund somewhere got screwed. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. So I bought some and then it kept going down. So I sold out like $40 later. And that is when I learned I like risk of time when it comes to money. Like I would love to devote time into making a small business or real estate. Like that is my thing. But when it comes to investing, oh boy, am I not a risky person. I like stocks, but I will buy an entire market. I'll just buy an index fund and buy up a market and be like, well, United States, I own every company in it. United States isn't going to go anywhere. I'll buy that and be done. Because that's where my confidence is. Like United States and the rest of the world isn't going anywhere. So if I buy up all of the companies, I'm good. But I love that you have the confidence and courage. I wish I had that risk tolerance to be like, oh yeah, drop 20%, please, not a big deal. Instead, you have this big picture mindset, looking at all the benefits it's brought you, how it helped, like, basically it helped you enable like stability when streaming for and casting for CDPR, helped your parents. That's just so cool. That's awesome. Do you think that like crypto is gonna, when you look back on this part of your life, think crypto is just going to be one of those things that was transformative? Like without it, your life would be different? Or do you think it just like accelerates you forward?
It
Mm-hmm.
certainly accelerates. It's the reason I'm more like steady with it now is because I know how much I invested, where I've taken like
Mm-hmm.
bits of Twitch money when I first started earning that little bit of monthly
Uh-huh.
payout. It's not a lot, but it was a lot for me because it was my first real income. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd put it into Bitcoin every time and I put it in. And I know by now the amount I've put in,
Uh-huh.
and the amount I've taken out as profits. I've almost taken out all of the money I've put in initially. And
Wow.
what's left is like, times 5, times 10, So I
Mm-hmm.
know I'm playing with, to me, it's like, fake game money. It's like Witcher currency.
Uh-huh.
It's not real. It's like a fun game. But then every now and then I get this reality check like, oh gosh, I need to upgrade my PC because it's
Uh-huh.
buffering. And then I take out a chunk of that play money and it's suddenly into my bank account and it's real. And it's a bit surreal, and I don't think I'll ever get, used to it. But if I like saving up the fake game money
Uh-huh.
in my cryptocurrencies, and it makes me happy. But like I said, if I lost every single cent, it would be devastating, but it would still be money I would never have gotten if I didn't invest in cryptocurrencies to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, because it's almost all profits I'm just playing around with at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost you have such a great mentality. I do not have this mentality. Have an investing mind and I can make money, dance, and grow. Like that's easy for me to do, but I don't have that risk tolerance. I love that you're saying there, like, oh yeah, it's fake money, it's there. And if it all went bankrupt, I'm basically at break even. But every so often, you have the moment saying, okay, look, to go further in this life, I might need. Right now, it's a PC upgrade. Maybe, after you finish up your honors, you'll say, wow, I need a plane ticket to Toronto. And you'll pull up your little Bitcoin or your wallet of your different currencies, your Bitcoin, your Ripple, Ethereum, etc. You're like, oh yeah, I can afford all that. I'm just gonna withdraw what I need and off I go. That's crazy. I like that so much. But then while it's in there, when all this volatility is happening, you're like, oh, Witcher coins. Witcher coins, who cares? It's like something of the video games. I love that. It is such a great
Yeah, it's
mentality.
like it hurts in a funny way, like the, oh no, my Monopoly money, it's all gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just wait. I'm like, again, I at least I know that I am privileged enough to, I have parents who work very hard, and so I have a roof over my head, I have food. So it's not like that money is going to define whether I get to eat the next day. Like, I have the privilege of saving all my money. Well, unless I do have to put money into my own
Mm-hmm.
setup, and I have to, all the other things that go into Twitch and all of that,
Yep.
I do pay myself. But it's, if something goes wrong, I know at the end of the day I still have family that will be able to help.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I know not a lot of people have that,
That's
so
true.
they might be in a bad situation if the stocks, fall, and if
Mm-hmm.
crypto becomes non-existent. That might mean, like, whether they have a house or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm well aware of that fact, though, at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
No, privilege is it's complicated because I also have that. So the reason I was able to quit my job and say, "Look, John, you're going to start from zero on streaming. You're just going to go for it." This is after trying two other business ideas and failing both of them. Is because, if I go broke, like I go back, crash on my mom's couch, and after my time at a tech startup, that's what I did. I burned out, crashed there, and had 7.5 years trying to re-piece together my mind and find a new job and a new career path. And I did that, but that's also privilege, right? I had a parent that, or parents, my dad would have taken me in as well, where I could have just crashed on their couch. I have a perfect safety net, and I bounce back from zero. But not everyone gets that. But it's also, I'm glad that you're using that, if that makes sense, right? You have ambition, and you strike me as someone who is ambitious, right? You're trying cryptocurrency. You have a really thought out career path or idea for it and trying things step by step, getting your honors, and also trying again after you failed the first time. You have this, and then you have like ambition to live abroad because you're thinking, oh man, what about future kids? Do I really want them to grow up here? You're really taking full advantage of what you're given, and I love that. So I get you have privilege, but also I like that you're making the most of it to try to push yourself as far as you can. I think it's really impressive.
But
Huh.
thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I once heard this thing. It was some sort of inspirational quote from someone, I can't remember, but that person was inspirational enough for me to take it seriously, and it really struck me. It was, they asked yourself to. They said, imagine one day you were sitting on the couch and a portal opened up in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a different version of yourself from an alternate reality stepped out in front of you. And that version was the perfect version that you could possibly be, with everything that you could possibly accomplish in this life on a
Okay.
realistic level. And they asked, what difference would that version of yourself be compared to the one you are now? And that's really struck me, because the moment you sort of think of this, you actually picture a version of yourself that you can attain, and you aren't there yet.
Uh huh.
And I hated that feeling, because I saw myself with a degree. I saw myself, streaming, because back then I wasn't. I was too afraid of the concept to even try.
Mm-hmm.
I saw myself with all these things, and I just realized, wow, like, I never want to be in that position. I want to be the one who steps through the portal. So I started work, every time I'm trying to figure out what's the next move, I think what version is going to step through that portal, and you just immediately get the answers like that version is going to do a degree in psychology right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I've reached a point where I feel very content with
Mm-hmm.
the way things turned out. At least I know I've given my all. So that's all I want to look back at one day is and know I gave my all. So it could not have turned out better. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's not that I slacked in any way. But yeah, at least that's my
Yeah.
life right now. And you
I,
know, everyone has their own
mm-hmm.
path and everyone has their own little thing they really want to achieve. And yeah, I like the fact that you're streaming and you went for it. It's I have a lot of respect for people who end up streaming because they all have that thing in common where they want to achieve something, you know, and you always start off with a lot of doubt when you start streaming.
Yes.
And yeah, getting where you are right now, I mean, it's extremely impressive. And yeah, hats off to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think there is and I was just talking about this Freddie Babes yesterday, about we both had the same thought, and it's actually ironically very similar to the same exact way you view it. Same conclusion, different way to visualize it. Where I often visualize, if I'm about to die in an hour, like 50 years
Yeah.
ahead in my life, like in hospice, on a bed, middle of the night, 2 a.m., I am alone, and I realize I'm going to pass away. I've lived my full life. There's no future to look forward to. I can't do anything in the present. I can't move. I'm about to pass away in an hour. I'm old, crippled. Like, I'm done. The only thing I can do is look at my past and say, how did I do? Like, what do I think about what I've accomplished? And am I satisfied? And I feel like that's ironically the exact same thing as the best version of yourself, where you're looking at
Yes.
basically, and when I look back, I'm saying, what did I do? When you're looking to your best version of yourself, you're looking forward, but they're both looking at the same thing, that path to your full potential. And it's so cool.
Mhm.
And then the pursuit of that is so scary. I still wake up and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Then I turn off the camera and get back to work. Because there's a scariness in trying to pursue that potential. And again, I feel like it goes back to your mentality, this drive you have to be your best self and take those risks, take those chances, and push yourself forward. Do you have any advice for people that are struggling with that? Because I feel like when people get that and they're willing to overcome their own fears, the drive is there and they will push themselves. But there's a lot of fear there. What would you say to someone struggling with that?
I don't. What are your views on Jordan Peterson before I continue?
Okay, so
with
it's
this
so funny. I saw someone in the
conversation?
chat mention it, and so Jordan Peterson is an interesting character. I would divide part of his stuff from the rest. Part of it is his self-help stuff. This is universal, and he's trying to apply it to everyone. And there are flaws with it, but it does work for some people, and I give it a lot of credit. His political stuff is very different, and I feel
Yes.
that he roots a lot of it in a straw man argument, where it appeals to a certain group of people who do not want to worry about, like, want a very traditionalist view, but he strawmans this, like, artificial Marxist who that doesn't appear, because Marxism is kind of it's not really popular. The most successful communist nation in the world is China, which has a capitalist market, plenty of inequality, and like the full capitalism shebang. This Marxism inequality Marxism equality that he fights against doesn't exist. I feel like it's very fearful. But his self-care stuff about competing against yourself, trying to initiate things, definitely can work for some people, and there's some interesting thoughts there. But definitely don't agree with everything he says. What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson?
Awesome. Well, I totally agree with you. And no one is perfect.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, definitely don't have a cult vibe there to Jordan. But no, with regards to his self-help, I find that extraordinary most of the time.
Uh-huh.
And it's just very applicable to a lot of things I agree with, which obviously is going to be subjective at the end of the day. But yeah, so there's two things I can mention that would be quoting him with regards to, you know, that thing we talked about with like existential anxiety of death and the portal thing.
Yes.
It's, well, with him, he says, you're always going to face anxiety, right? Now, you're going to have a big barrier in front of you, and you have two options. You can either run away back from the barrier, which he always calls the dragon. That's just his way of referring to anything. And you can run away, but you're still going to experience that anxiety, and you're not going to achieve a single thing. Or you can run towards it, overcome it, you're still going to experience anxiety, but whilst you're doing it, you're going to actually achieve something. And
Yes.
that in itself, it's a very, very simple thing to say, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
obvious, but like with myself, I always tended to procrastinate a
Mm-hmm.
lot, and that's my way of running away from the task at hand. And you didn't feel better while procrastinating, you feel
Yes.
a large amount of anxiety. Now when I feel that anxiety, I go ahead and I do the stupid task. And at least at the end of the day, I have achieved something and the anxiety
Yes.
goes away. But yeah, his thing he said that's very similar to what you and I just discussed is that he calls it the self-authoring program, where you should picture your life in 10 years from now, and you should write again the
Mm-hmm.
best thing you could possibly achieve, like in every aspect of your life. If you went ahead now and started working on all of these things, where would you be in 10 years? And then you need, after that, you do the exact opposite and you say, all right, well, if I continue doing what I'm doing now and I'm not doing all of these things, where will I end up in 10 years then? And
Mm-hmm.
normally that is has a very bad answer, and that fear is what should drive you to achieve the exact opposite of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's normally what I do. It's what if
Nice.
I fail my degree now? It's, can I redo my degree, or am I stuck in South Africa and I can't even leave the country because I don't have an honors degree, and
Mm-hmm.
where do I end up then? And the same with streaming, it's all of that. You keep asking yourself, all right, but what if I don't do it? What happens then? And that, yeah, well, that's what drives me. It's a bit of an existential anxiety, to say the least, because it will fill you with angst, but like he said, you can ignore it. You can be
Mm-hmm.
oblivious to it and you can just like do nothing.
Yes.
But that's not going to make it go away. That's just going to make you ignorant of what's about to happen in,
Mm-hmm.
in a few years' time. And when it comes, it's going to be too late.
Yes, I think Drea, I would agree with a lot of that. And that's the kind of stuff that works well for me as well. This fear of what will you be if you don't try to seek your full potential? And on then versus what you could potentially be. Now there are real sacrifices that come with trying to seek your own or your own potential. For example, streaming is unbelievably taxing on hours of content creation. I'm sure in your case with studying, streaming, we haven't even gotten to it. And maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know how much time you still have. But for being a
Ah, I'm
writer,
here.
you're still here? Perfect. Being a writer, you have all these things going on, and then you have to make sacrifices. And that's kind of the kicker. It's like, okay, if I'm spending all my time doing all these things, I might not have enough time to hang with my friends as frequently. Or maybe I won't be taking vacations as often. Like, what does that, and then there's that sacrifice component of it. But that fear, that drive, and also wanting something to be that version of yourself, it's kind of like a mix, like a dark motivator of I'm afraid of not being my full potential, and the positive motivator of, man, wouldn't I really like to be my full potential? And going for it, that is my jam. I think my only
Mhm.
critique of Jordan Peterson's philosophy there, which is why I don't think it applies to everyone, but definitely works for me. I think it sounds like it
Yeah.
clearly works for you. Is what if your perfect image of yourself is a really bad choice? So I often think of somebody who, like, if you, my goal was to be like a magazine, like the magazine models that are all edited of computers. That's not a possible dream. I might pursue it, but there's no way to get there and achieve
Mhm.
it in a healthy, sustainable fashion. So that's
Yeah.
my biggest critique on his self-help side, which I think is by far Jordan Peterson's strongest part, is if you have
Mm.
a bad image of what you think you should be doing, it all falls apart. There's no grounding on like some baseline stuff you should always be hitting. But that's my only critique of it.
That's very
Mm-hmm.
that's a very interesting way to look at it. I mean, it's spot on. I mean, then the problem goes much deeper,
Uh-huh.
obviously. Like his solutions are very umbrella termish. I feel
Yes.
like it attracts the people that need that advice, like
I
myself.
agree.
Like I've been watching him since high school, and of course there's been a lot of politics, and it's all American politics, so
Uh-huh.
it's
Yeah.
that's it I it was interesting, because when I started speaking about him in my stream when I was a bit of, like, younger, I was a big fan, and like people would be like, "Yeah, they hate him," and I
Uh-huh.
had no context for that because I was only watching his self-help videos, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
"But how on earth could you hate the guy?" And then I saw where the controversy was coming from. It was because of the new law they wanted to implement in Canada, and that's a whole different conversation.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I can totally see how some of his advice, you'd have to tackle that problem like you just mentioned, someone
Mm-hmm.
wanting to attainable something that's not healthy.
Yes.
That needs to be tackled in therapy, because that's
Hmm.
going to seep into everyday life, whether you plan on achieving that goal or not, you know.
Yes, that's it.
Um,
Hmm.
but certainly, I think ideally when you use the self-authoring program, you'd ideally want to give it to a psychological professional to read and ask what they think about it.
Uh-huh.
I think that would solve that problem, is if
Yes.
someone can tell you whether that's a realistic thing you're striving for, or whether you're just going to burn out along the way because it's impossible and it's unhealthy and you shouldn't be pursuing that at all.
Yes, I agree. I think if you go to a psychological professional, that works. Another way is just if Jordan Peterson, or really as someone you admire, if you lay out a couple of basic things that they do that might help you break down the image from the reality. So if I were to say, like, let's say I want to be Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I'm not gonna get, I'm never gonna look like him, right? I also hate working out, but I might say, some things I really like is he's really funny. I could take improv classes and get funnier. That is a skill. He's really fit. I can go to the gym and get fit and go at that for a decade. Now I might not ever look quite like him, but I can take some of the principles
Hey,
that he
you
has
can
and go.
try.
I mean, I could go bald. I kind of like my hair though.
Yeah, keep the hair. It suits you.
Thank you, thank you. So I think that's my critique of Jordan Peterson. His political stuff, I think, is easier to critique. I think it's on shakier ground, and it attracts a different type of people. But it's so funny. I really wish Jordan would just double down on the self-care stuff. His self-care stuff is really good, and you could leave a great legacy of that. The other aspects, it makes him popular, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's his belief, but I think it's his Achilles heel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm attracted to some of his peculiar things, because he talks about things that nobody talks about. Like I don't know if people often refer to the lobster thing. I don't know if you saw his
No, tell
interview
me.
with Kathy Newman, but yeah, so it's very interesting because he bases this off of a study. And so his arguments, and I'm just talking about the theory here. I'm not for or against it. I don't have the knowledge to comment on it. But so he was talking about the hierarchy, and people are trying to disentangle or dismantle the hierarchy that we have in, our society. And what his point was is that it's ingrained in our biological systems.
Uh-huh.
And so what he did was he referenced studies that sort of took us back in evolution to all the way to a common ancestor with lobsters.
Uh-huh.
Now, this shouldn't be shocking. We share a lot of DNA with bananas. You can look this up. So the fact that we have a lot of common DNA, well, genetics with lobsters, it shouldn't be too shocking. But anyway, so the study showed how hierarchies affect the amount of serotonin and dopamine in lobsters. The lower a lobster was in the hierarchy, the less dopamine and serotonin his brain excretes. And it was directly programmed in order to justify his hierarchical
Weird.
my English.
No, you're good. My English is terrible.
In the hierarchy. And yeah, my English sucks. And what it basically showed was we have the exact same sort of brain neural what do you call it, synapses and all of that jazz going on, where our happiness is directly affected by the hierarchy. It's not totally dependent on it. I mean, there are millions of things that affect your happiness, but the hierarchy has a direct influence on it, which just goes to show that humans will always strive for power. And where you are in that hierarchy is so important for your mental health. If you go out of high school and you just don't pursue anything and you sort of drop out of society, your brain registers the fact that you're very low in the hierarchy, and it affects your happiness. It can lead you into depression, and the higher you go into the system, the more happy you become. Now, I'm not saying become a CEO. I'm saying just find your position in society, and build on that, even if it's just studying or becoming a streamer, having 100 people watch your podcast right now. That directly affects the way your brain perceives your situation in the hierarchy. And it's an interesting way, but you should go and read his 12 Rules of Life, where he actually talks about it 20 times better than I just attempted to paraphrase it. But it's these sort of things that it's so incredibly interesting for me, if you can base it on science, that is.
So you're talking about this hierarchy, and I agree. I think there is a nature of people that organize themselves in the hierarchy to differentiate themselves, understand their place in the world. And it's just like a mental shortcut. Of if I am
Hmm.
here, then I do this, this, and this. Probably, honestly, best illustrated in many ways in India with the caste system, where you're born like
Oh
here you
yeah.
go. But paradoxically, I would say if you always focus on hierarchy, you kind of miss the point to an extent. Where you
Hmm.
can often think of Dr. K from Healthy Gamer, also known as Healthy Gamer GG. He's a therapist who does a lot of streaming as well. Talks about therapy, and he talks about how he's these corporate executives coming in and they're just unhappy, and they're at the top of like the social hierarchy, but they're still unhappy. They didn't actually find it. When I think it's important to
Mm.
differentiate that if you're viewing things like a hierarchy as, and I don't know where Jordan Peterson goes with this, but this is where I would go with it. Where I wouldn't view hierarchy as money or power. I would view it as a hierarchy of potentials of you, and the more you're hitting your potential and are satisfied of that potential, probably the happier you'll be. And the less you feel like you're hitting your potential, the more unhappy you're going to be. But that isn't necessarily relative to other people. That is mentally to you. Now, of course, in part of this pyramid, you probably want things like food, water, shelter, safety, et cetera, et cetera. And they should be a part of it in whatever abundance you need. But that peak self does not mean you have to be Jeff Bezos, who recently got divorced. You can be, run your own small company, a streamer. Maybe you're very satisfied that you're a good spouse. Maybe you're very satisfied that you have a beautiful garden that you work on every day. And that can bring that, I feel like, that hierarchy, that peak hierarchy of comparing yourself against yourself. So that's my thought.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
No, I totally agree with you. The thing is, I think where people go wrong is like the thing I mentioned about the hierarchy just now. People, they take what they want to hear and they center their entire life around that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's never good because there are so many things that go along with it. And like his comment was essentially like subconsciously, where you are in the hierarchy will affect how happy you are.
Yep.
But that's not everything. I mean, you're going to have CEOs who are depressed because they are working all the time to retain that position, and their
Yep.
family life is falling apart. They're not happy. They don't know what the purpose of life is. It's I mean, but they would be more sad if they were doing all of that and they were a little bit lower in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Essentially is what that would come down to. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's just, I think he started going on a lot more about politics when he got pulled into it with the whole Canadian legislation thing, um
Mm-hmm.
and where he sort of tries to compare us to animals. I just happen to love animals, so I find it very interesting because the other one he was talking about is, people were saying, well, people go to war and people shouldn't go to war,
Uh-huh.
and we're the only living beings who do that. And he was like, no, wait, that's not true. I
No.
mean, they have documented tribes of apes who
Yep.
actually went to war with each other. They
Uh-huh.
had two groups, and these apes literally went into each other's territories, and
Uh-huh.
fought to the death. And it was just more proof that it's not something we're doing that none
Mm-hmm.
of the other animals are doing. It's something that's ingrained within us. It's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we should actively strive against, but knowing where it comes from, it's not just a human concept. It's just the way we are. We're tribal beings, and
Mm-hmm.
it's good to know that. So because when you can name something, you can fight against it. So knowing the way we're programmed to function, that's the first step, and I quite like that.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement there. Acknowledging our biology, though paradoxically, we have to also acknowledge our self-awareness, self-actualization of, hey, we now have an intelligence that circumvents this impulsive biology in us. And we have to kind of justify the two. If you're always focused on saying what all your mind is like, I'm thinking, I must act, and here's like my place in society, you're probably not going to satisfy that hidden like id, as Freud called it, right? My needs, my wants, my things I must get
Oh, I
now, now,
love the
now.
id. We
Hmm?
just studied it, and it's so interesting. I love
Yeah.
that you know about it.
Well, thank you. I try to keep informed as best I can, especially as I keep
Yeah,
doing more of these
you're
interviews.
educated. It's great.
Yeah. Well,
I love it.
I'm feeling super good that I watched all those Jordan Peterson interviews and presentations. And I'm like, wow, that's really paying off right now as we have this talk, and I know what we're talking about. It feels good. But I think it's really important, actually. I think self-education goes a long way. We kind of talked about the paradox earlier of how education's buying your ticket. In your case, it's a much bigger ticket than mine is. Mine's like, John, you get a job somewhere, but your ticket might be the ticket out of the country. to set up a better life for yourself elsewhere. But paradoxically, I would say, while my education made me curious, it's the stuff I learned self-taught myself outside of it that helps me build in all these other areas I missed. Probably a difficulty of the fact that job specialization is such a key thing in a capitalist society, where you need to be really good at one thing. But really, like, you probably need a good general knowledge as well. And that latter bit is on you to fill out. So how did you discover Jordan Peterson in the first place?
Before I answer that one, do you know the saying of a jack of all trades but a master of one?
No, but I've not heard that particular phrase. I heard jack of all trades, master of none, not master of one. Or would you say the word none or one? One the number and none like nothing.
Sorry, it's a master of none. I said it incorrectly. Do you know you know the phrase a jack of all trades but a master of none?
Yes.
Sorry, that's my fault.
No, all good, all good. Yeah. Familiar.
You know the rest of the phrase though, because a lot of people don't.
I don't. Teach me.
Okay, so the actual phrase that people just decided to cut out was a jack of all trades but a master of none is oftentimes better than a master of one.
Ooh, fancy.
And it's the actual phrase. Now, I repeat it, which makes it totally changes the meaning because it basically insults you for not having a master in a trade. But what it says is a jack of all trades but a master of none is oftentimes better than a master of one. So having a general knowledge of a lot of subjects instead of having only a lot of knowledge of one subject is oftentimes just better. So it's quite interesting that the way you stated it just now about specializing in one particular field versus having a knowledge of all. It's true. It's normally better to have a lot of knowledge of all trades, but in our society you kind of need to be an expert in one thing. You need to be the best at that thing, and that's the way you get the job, and that's the way you rise in the hierarchy. And that not everyone's cut out for that, especially since you have one person at the top of that hierarchy and not everyone can win. It's not good.
Yeah, well, not only can not everyone win, and there's also the paradox of going back to biology. Like, what do human beings need to do to be engaged? So I'm rereading. I'm trying to get back into reading, and my rule for reading is usually, at least the trend is, if I read 2 good books in a row, I will fall in love with reading, and I will read like a fiend. And I have 2 bookshelves in my other room. Like, that is important. In my 1-bedroom apartment, there are 2 bookshelves full. Not like just a shelf, but like each bookshelf has multiple shelves, and they're just packed. But if I read 2 good books in a row, I'm super addicted to reading. I'll read a ton. If I read 2 bad books in a row, I'm just done with reading, and I'll be like 3 months before I try again. So I'm trying to cheat right now by rereading my favorite business book of all time, which is a book written by a Brazilian author about his company. The book's called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. Have you heard of Tim Ferriss? Off shot.
Tim
Ferriss.
Did he write a book?
He wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, Tools of Titans. Oh, you should write this one down.
The only economy book I've ever read was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I normally go towards psychology and but not economy. But
no, this is business. This is business. But no, you should first. Let me note a couple things. First, you should write down the words Tim Ferriss. If you like Jordan Peterson and this business side, this would be the person on like the bridge you're looking for, the bridge of business and Jordan Peterson. Tim Ferriss got really famous for writing a book on how he made a bunch of money by only working 4 hours a week. I mean, a ton of money.
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of cheesy how he did it, but just like Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's kind of like entryway. But what he does that's really good is, if you go further, what he did is he not only propelled it into a really good like private investing career. He like was one of the earliest investors in Uber. He then propelled his fame and fortune to let him interview all kinds of top people in each of their fields, whether you're like an Olympian, multi-billionaire, etc. Got to interview all these people. And I ran into Ricardo Semler when he was being interviewed, or somebody was interviewing about him with Tim Ferriss. Ricardo Semler is fascinating. Basically, he took the free market, but tried to adapt it to human nature and made it an unbelievably successful company in Brazil. Because he challenged a lot of the ways we approach things and tried to almost, in many ways, align it better with biology. Where in how Europe developed capitalism is assembly line, like Henry Ford or before him Taylor. Everyone does a little like crank on a turn, very specialized. Like this, you are the master of turning the wrench in this particular manner. And you're going to do it 100,000 times today. And you'll do 100,000 tomorrow. And we're going to keep feeding you that task. And what Semler did, which I think was so fascinating, was I'm rereading it to cheat a little bit just to enjoy the book. But he pointed out that, like, look, instead of having people do this boring thing over and over and over and you get like disengaged, meet people where their biology's at. Keep them engaged by giving them different tasks. Force them to change jobs sometimes. Give them multiple different things to do in a day to engage with it. And I think that's fascinating. I'm not sure how we got down this path, I confess. I got really caught up in the book and I was very excited. But I think it's that bridge for
It
me.
sounds extremely interesting.
Well, I'd recommend it. Maverick by Ricardo Semler. And my favorite book, where for me, it reminds me of that bridge of biology is at the end of the day in us. And we can build systems that go with it or against it. Might as well gear them towards with it. Like how Jordan Peterson of the self-help. You're biological. Try to work with your biology, move forward. You know, face your fears, but also acknowledge that they're there and they're not going to go away. Push forward. Instead of giving into your biology or trying to deny your biology and burning out. It's that hybrid. I don't have a note. Please.
No, it's extremely interesting. Yeah, what you're saying. It's like nature versus nurture. It's always that. It's I see someone asked in chat whether there's free will. I mean, because you have to determine like where does biology and environment meet, and
yes,
is there more to it? I see you're laughing. What?
Oh, I was laughing. Question? That was part of the the Freddie Babes interview. That was in there. If you want to see a lot of talk on free will, go to the interview from yesterday on the YouTube or the Spotify. But I was laughing about it.
I'm gonna check it out.
Okay. Well,
is there free will? What's the conclusion?
So it was really interesting. So I was watching. Do you know Alan Watts by chance?
I do. I know the name, but I have zero idea what the context is.
He is my guilty pleasure philosopher. He's the philosopher that I listen to, and I just want to feel good and like really warm up. He's very skilled at taking big ideas that are like spiritual and bringing them down to earth in 2 sentences. And he was challenging the id, ego, and superego, talking a bit about it, where we have our sense of free will. And we decide things. For example, I can decide to take a sip of water, right? But he pointed out, who made the decision that I should decide that whether I should take a sip of water just now? When I never decided to decide. I just said I need to decide whether I want a sip of water right now. I need to decide what words come out of my mouth. But where is the decision that tells me I should make this decision? Well, that's an involuntary action. That gets really weird, right? We have this self-actualization in the system, but we're really like a part of this bigger system because our free will, our conscious, is very much dictated by an unconscious force, an involuntary force. Because our involuntary force is kicking on our consciousness to say, pay attention here, pay attention there, decide here. And while we make a decision consciously, it's almost like a sensor. As opposed to this, I'm so free will, I'm making decisions, but something else involuntary, subconsciously, that we have no control over is telling us to make a decision on something. It's pushing us to. That gets really weird. Free will gets really mucked up really fast if you're constantly saying, well, what made me decide? What told me I must make a decision here? Or to even visualize it as a decision. So I think, well, what are your thoughts there before I go further?
Well, you said you think. What's your conclusion there?
Well, I think he has a good point. And for Alan Watts, his grand idea, and this is what he jumps to in that particular talk. He instantly jumps to it because it's the obvious conclusion. Is saying like, look, everything is one system, and he refers to this as God or the Godhead. Like it's all one. You're not different from everything. You are as much a chair as the chair is you. And remember, notice this involuntariness to it all. You're just part of it all. You're not separate. You might visualize it separate. Your consciousness might choose to decide to visualize itself separately, but you're very much linked to it. In the sense, there is no separation. We make our own separation, but you're linked to it all. And as a result, you can't not be in the right place at the right time. You are exactly as you're supposed to be. So, doesn't mean don't seek your goals, right? And chase your dreams, right? Alan Watts is very big about chasing your dreams and making fun of the current systems. Where he's like, well, everyone's teaching each other. They're basically, you live your life to retire. You get there, you hated everything, and then you teach your kids to do it again. Makes fun of it all. And the systems of educating, getting rid of creativity, and are closing us out. And I think there is a lot of truth to it, where there's kind of a sense of chase your dreams, do what you can. You have your life, experience life. but you also are life. You also are everything. There is truly at the end of the day very much an involuntary nature to that, and you are connected to everything. You're defined by everything, and vice versa. You can't not be in the right place because there isn't anything else. You're all linked. But there is that other part of saying, like, it's okay to have it be separated, focus on your life, do your best. But, when the going gets tough, I like to think, like, oh yeah, well, at the end of the day, I'm part of it all. It's okay. This is how it's meant to be, but let's keep pushing forward, giving it my best to hit the next thing I want. Paradox, but I think it's a healthy paradox to keep in mind and then lean into it to different parts at different times. Those are my thoughts about free will. So I'd probably say no. I'd lean more towards no, but you should still treat it as a yes. But it really isn't there. Mm-hmm.
I'm yeah, I love that explanation, by the way. What I'm getting from that is that you're likely not spiritual, yes?
Say that one more time. Cut out for a sec.
Y- You're likely not spiritual.
Yes, I'm not a very spiritual person. I think I'm specifically, especially not religious. I can make an okay argument that there is a God if I want to take a different route, which is saying the rules of this life are really well defined. Like there's a logic to the madness. That makes me suspicious. But I'm that God has confessed. I'm not waiting for the second coming of Jesus. I'm not waiting. I'm not worried about going to hell. Like these are not worries on my plate. Are you? Elaborate though. You did point that out. Where'd you want to go at this point?
That's what separates me from religion and spirituality. As in, religion is sort of a story that goes along trying to explain things in a manner, whereas
Mm-hmm.
let's say there was more to life than what we see before us. I'd say spirituality is what is.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is what our idea of it is. And of course, you're
Yes.
going to have hundreds of religions, and I think none of them are right.
Uh huh.
Because you'd probably have a little bit of each that is a little bit like onto something. But yeah, so when free will comes into play, for me, I'd say if there was more to life than just the biological form, I'd
Mm-hmm.
say that you know, I'd say that you'd have to undergo ego death in a sense to
Uh
really
huh.
understand what free will is. Because the ego is you, the
Uh
ego
huh.
is John, the ego is literally your personality, your name, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to ask yourself if that all went away, what's left?
Yep.
You know,
Um,
what on earth survives if your body dies? If there
mm-hmm.
was anything after this, any sort of consciousness, what on earth would that be? Because your brain doesn't exist anymore. Everything that makes you you ceases to exist. So if there was any sort of soul or anything like that, what would it be? And you have these monks, these Buddhist monks, spending their whole life meditating away, trying to get rid of the ego. Obviously
Mm-hmm.
not the ego in an egoistical sense, but the ego
Yes.
in the Freudian sense,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find out what's left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when it comes to free will, I always thought if I were to construct a very unethical experiment, what I'd do is I'd clone 10 people, and I'd clone a person 10 times. I would put them in different rooms, and I'd start asking them questions that are morally orientated. And if
Mm-hmm.
a single one of those clones answers a question in a different way than one of the others, I feel that would prove the existence of a soul. Because if you have the exact same environment and you have the exact same biology, those clones should do the exact same things, answering the exact same questions. They would have the same mannerisms. Of course, this would be almost impossible to replicate because you can't have a single thing that's off. You'd have to have the same person conduct the same interview at the same time of
Mm-hmm.
the day. But yeah, that's where free will becomes very interesting for me. But yeah, free will is a very interesting subject. I don't know how deep you'd like to go into it.
I'm willing to go wherever. I'm just here for a good conversation. That's the way I view it. I ignore the needs of the chat. I'm just here to have a good, deep conversation. But if you want to go down this path, I'm happy to walk it. It's a fun one. So,
Yeah, it's just yeah. Oh well, it's just a lot of like. Again, I'm very open about things. I have
uh
no
huh.
dead set belief in it. It's just so you know. So
Oh,
I'm
it's
not in
good.
a defensive or in a any sort of. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just theorizing, which is fun. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot of people like when they try to talk about religion and trying to disprove the possibility of, let's put
Uh
it
huh.
like that, the possibility that there's more to life. They often say, well, why would evil exist, right?
Yep.
And my argument would always be, well, free will. because if you're on this earth as a human, you have to have free will, right? Because what's the point then? If you had some sort of deity who was able to stop evil from happening, you'd have to have that deity control a person. You'd have to have him make Hitler not do what Hitler did, and that would immediately, take away Hitler's free will, his consciousness, and he would just be a sort of a puppet, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's always my sort of argument for the existence of evil, because free will exists and it gives us the option to do bad things, and you can't stop people from doing bad things. It's just one of those things in life, right? And that's why I think free will exists. But
Okay.
yeah, I think
Uh,
free will exists.
I
At
think
the end of the day, I think there's more to it.
I don't know if I go. I hold people liable for their actions, but I'm not sure how far to go into like free will versus not free will. Like there's the ego, but I feel like there is a connectedness to it all, where there's that involuntary thing that forces you to make a decision, or gears you towards a certain thing that makes me question that aspect of it. Not that I can do anything about it. My ego is here. It is the sensor that's guiding this body, but this body is also complicated. Because if I
Mhm.
go to sleep and I wake up, the atoms are in a different formation. Like, am I still the same person as I fell asleep? Am I different moment to moment? Is there one dying every second? Like every moment, the infinite copies of me die because now my thoughts are a little different. It gets weird. I would say for your argument, if there's thoughts on like good versus evil, I would simply challenge. My challenge would be very simple. I want you to imagine a world uh, with no light. Light does not exist on this world, not just world, but in the entire existence itself. Light is gone. I've removed it. Is there darkness? Like if there was no
If you
light in
remove
existence,
light,
light itself, there's no light. Is there darkness?
okay? Yes,
But I would argue,
because
mhm, please.
darkness is the absence of light,
But light never,
just as death is the absence of life.
right, right.
It's yeah. So darkness. Well, your argument would be that darkness in itself isn't an object. Light is an object, and darkness is merely the word we use to describe the absence of light.
Right.
So your argument could very well be that darkness in itself isn't something that exists. It's merely a word we use for the absence of something else, right?
Correct, to an extent. In a sense of they're linked terms. If there is light, and then there can be an absence of light, then there must be darkness, right? If everything was light, there'd be no light or darkness. I mean, you could say there's a particle, but darkness wouldn't be there. Everything is light. But what I would say, if there's good, there must be evil. Because if some things are
Mm-hmm.
better than others, we're just going to put whatever the negative things are is evil, and the positive things is good. So, for example, let's say every day you would get a chocolate cake, but one day a month you'd only get one slice of chocolate cake, like a tragedy. That one day would be pretty evil. You'd wake up and you're ready for your chocolate cake, and just one slice of chocolate cake. How dare me? Like, how horrible is that? I'm not sure that I would say, for me, I don't think either evil or good argument applies to God as much. For if there is differentiation between things that help you and things, if there's things that help you, there must be things that help you more or less, relatively speaking. Therefore, there must be evil as a result. So that is my inherent thought about that. But I'm not sure. I don't think it would apply to like God or not God, or free will or not free will. It's like, if there is going to be things that help you more and your ego more, then there's going to be things that hurt it more, and those things must be evil.
It's one of those, right? If only you could prove it physically, like the only way to prove that there's more to life than what we perceive would be to prove that there is more than just the body. You'd have to prove there's a soul, but you have to do it scientifically, not with theory. You'd need to be able to. It's a very difficult situation in order to. I mean, this is where my dirty pleasures come from. Don't quote me on that. But the scientific proof. That's why I like going into the academia of people's subjective experiences of it. Now, obviously, all of these things, I mean, they can be disproven, or well, they can't be proven. Let's put it like that. So it's more of you take someone's word for it or you don't. But like near-death experiences, people claiming they can astral project out of body experiences, all of that jazz, where you've actually had now this is where my interests come from. scientifically proving the existence of a soul. That would prove the existence of something like an afterlife, a different dimension, if you will, that coexists with the one we're on. I know this is getting out of hand, so just stop me if I am going too far here. But like something that coexists, same consciousness has a physical form we can't perceive, right? So you've had people, I don't know if you know of the term of astral projection or remote viewing. It's it's something the American government has actually studied. I mean, like really, they have. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you were muted.
Aha, I did mute myself accidentally. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm back. Okay, can you hear me?
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So yes,
have
United
you
States
heard of
has
that?
done yes, because I remember there was a very
Remote
famous.
viewing.
Yeah, remote viewing, like when you're Buddhists describe it as like you're walking out of your body, an out of body experience. You can walk around
Yes.
with you.
Yes.
I also know the U.S. government has done studies on that because there's once a mentalist who was really good at faking it to the point where they brought him
Oh
in
yeah.
to the U.S. government to just do studies on, and they falsely concluded that yes, he has magic powers.
Oh no. I detest people who fake things because it
Mhm,
puts all of these scientific studies into jeopardy. Because it now, if I want to go into parapsychology, which is the study of
mhm,
anything supernatural,
yep,
you immediately picture someone faking something ludicrous,
yep,
and you can't have like because people really have near death experiences, and even if that's not a spiritual thing, even if that really is the brain just giving off happy hormones when it dies and
uh-huh,
it creates these hallucinations.
yep,
You know, I want to be able to study that and pinpoint exactly what happens. And now if I want to pursue that, I'm immediately labeled a, you know, someone who's a bit, you know, over meds. But for
mhm,
example, people claim they can astral project. I want to study those people and see either A, whether it's true, or B, what has gone wrong in their head.
uh-huh,
So but the way to do this is something that has been done before. And of course, you can go and look at the studies. And obviously, you'd need to replicate these studies. But you'd have a person who claims they can do that, right?
uh-huh,
So what they did is they locked this woman in a room and they put a piece of paper in a different room and
yep,
wrote a number on it. And what they'd tell her to do is, all right, you go ahead and do your thing, astral project, go into the other room and tell us what the number is. So they did that experiment a few times and she got it right. And of course, now when people look at criticize the studies because they don't want to replicate it and throw away their academia name, they
uh-huh,
say, oh well, she in the night she kind of rolled around and all of these electro things connected to her head weren't on, so you can't prove that she didn't stand up and go and find the number. And so like for me it's
mhm,
about replicating that, either at least proving it wrong because that is just as important,
yes,
or you know seeing what's up here. Why
mhm,
is this a thing? Like they've done this on bunnies as well, by the way, rabbits. And they claim that there's some sort of universal consciousness where people are somehow connected, right?
uh-huh,
And what they did was they took a rabbit and they took it across the country into a lab, and
mhm,
they took the rabbit's offspring, the babies, into a different part of the country.
okay,
And what they did was they monitored the mommy rabbits, and then they started scaring the baby rabbits. I don't know how. I hope they didn't torture them. And as the small rabbits started going berserk and screaming, immediately the rabbits across the country started going wild and panicking. And
mhm,
like they've done so many of these studies, but the thing is, it's so controversial. Nobody goes ahead and looks further into it. Like there could be 100 other explanations, sure,
mhm.
if we want to go into playing devil's advocate, but they also need to be covered. And yeah, I really want to do that. That's sort of my passion, is going into the things that people are too afraid to investigate and figure out what the hell's going on.
Nice. I think it's good. I also like that you're gonna try to replicate things like that. So I know there was a study or one habit that people do in academia. So let's go back. A key flaw in academia is if you get published. That's a big win.
Mhm.
That's all you're trying to do.
Yes.
And so what sometimes happens is one, you go for crazy ideas and hope it is statistically significant. And if it's not statistically significant to prove, you'll sometimes keep trying. They increase the sample size over and over and over until it's good.
Hmm.
So I know there was one time in a similar vein where they were trying to prove that people actually have psychic tendencies in a well-established author. That I found the proof.
Hmm.
We did this study. we did, I forget what the study exactly was, but we proved that they were right 5% or 10% more often than they're supposed to. Well, when they
It's like the
replicate,
astral projection.
yes, and when they somebody said there and said that's ridiculous. We're gonna actually. The other kicker is you do not get credit and fame for replicating studies. You get credit and fame for getting published on new studies. So somebody said that, we're gonna replicate it because it's ridiculous, and they proved it wrong. But that is also, I think, the paradox. So I love that you're going into a replication kind of mindset of right now in academia, there's a huge incentive to push the numbers a bit. It doesn't matter if you're 100% right, but as long as you get published, you're good. But then I like that you're coming up with this mindset of, okay, I'll test it. We'll test it, but I have a feeling it's not going to, at least you're skeptical potentially. I have a skepticism of like, let's double check. But you, of course, it sounds like you're excited to see it work.
I have new studies, but believe me, I wouldn't be telling you about those because I'd rather prove them before I talk about them, or else again, TL will see more
Yes.
from it. But the problem is you can study anything on Earth as long as you go about a scientific way of doing so. Just spewing conspiracy theories.
Yes.
That's not going to bring you anywhere. If you test something in a laboratory, that makes it an experiment, and you could do that, and disproving it again, just as important. But yeah, the conundrum about this is let's say we lived in this magical world, right, where a few people have these inherent psychological abilities, like some can see the future, or some can astral project, or some can do telekinesis, whatever. The problem with these studies is you need to find a person who can do it, A, and B, you need to be able to test that in such a manner that you prove it exists. You can't increase the sample. That's the problem, because you're not going to find 20 people who claim they can astral project. You simply won't be able to prove it. You are going to have to find one person who can do something exceptionally well on command, which is often something they claim they can't do. You can be skeptic about that as well, of course. And you'd have to be able to replicate that with a test retest sort of thing, where in order to test reliability, you'd have to have a different group of scientists come in, use the same person, and be able to get these exact same results. So that's sort of how you'd have to prove that sort of thing. But yeah, there are various other ways these things can be tested, and let's just say that the University of Toronto has an excellent neuroscience laboratory that I will be using.
Nice. That's awesome. I like that you're taking a very scientific approach to verifying these. Like, I remember there was a very famous magician who had eventually $1 million prize pool if anyone could prove any supernatural talent.
I know of him. Yes.
Yeah, and he no one claimed it, and ultimately cleaned so many people out.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it too.
Screw those people.
I know, right? Like, yeah, definitely. I also like the person that I mentioned that like the CIA actually studied and said, oh yeah, this guy has superpowers. FBI, one of the two, concluded that fake mentalist. He was the one, the magician of the $1 million prize pool, was the one who kept chasing after him and eventually disproved him in a really humiliating talk show with Johnny Carr, where Johnny Carr basically called him saying, hey, we're having this mentalist on. We don't know if he's fake or not. What would you do to make sure to really test it? And then the mentalist, or the magician, gave him like, do these 5 things and the entire thing is going to fail. And the entire thing failed. The mentalist went on, it's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the power today. So I think it's, maybe chat's figured out who I'm talking about. But it's so interesting, though, the supernatural thing. I do feel that people want to believe, which is why you see things like mega churches explode. And also see the things
That's sad. That's an American thing, by the way.
Is it an American thing? Okay.
Gosh, yeah, I've seen it. It's ridiculous. It's these masses of people, and these people flying around in private jets. I mean, we also have our fake preachers, believe me, but they don't get nearly as big as you guys do it over there.
I don't even know how they do it. Like, I get the energy. There's actually a really funny YouTube channel that does death metal music in the background to some of these people because they're so out there that it just makes for good like lyrics in a death metal song. Like, God's coming, and it's just like, get the guitar going. But it's wild. I don't understand I get the attraction of, here's somebody who seems very powerful, has all these lights, everyone's cheering for him, telling me the truth. Feels very nice, but it's also that spoon-fed lie, right? Deluding yourself from reality. You gotta verify everything. Or reflect that there's also that sense of you're responsible for what you believe in your own actions. So should also look at like what it does to people. I know another thing that's going around USA, which also has a like manner of belief, that impossibility to it, of QAnon, which is this online poster who has changed American politics significantly by convincing people that like Democrats are Satanists and eat children, and has had a huge effect on the, like, it has led to people like Pizzagate, I think, was because of them. Somebody thought they were keeping a bunch of children locked in the basement of a pizza shop.
Oh,
The pizza
I
shop,
recall that.
yeah, no, there's no basement to the pizza shop, and then but it still led to somebody showing up with a gun, ready to, bust up the place.
Trying to save the little children. Yeah,
Yeah, there's,
I've read
mhm.
about, again, these are the things we read about America. We don't read the normal things.
Most
We
things are
read only
normal.
these things, and we
Yes.
have to make our own conclusions about what's going on there.
Yeah, no, it's I can tell you, America's fine. There's plenty. I mean, the vast majority of it's a wonderful place, whether you're in a liberal place or a conservative place. Though, of course, if you're in a more conservative place, uh, you might have, like I look at certain rights. I don't know what your view on abortion is. I'm probably not going to go down that thing, but like certain more conservative states, hard to get things like access to abortion, potentially less protection for gay rights. Like these are things, the more traditional mindset there. While liberal places have typically more access and laws backing up that kind of stuff. But I will say, as a
Well,
whole, America's pretty nice.
yeah.
But please.
Mm.
Hmm.
I know, yeah, abortion things. I think like that's the big problem I also have with religion, to begin with.
Hmm.
I think you have the right to do with your own body whatever you want to do, even if
Hmm.
if other people find it morally wrong. They don't
Yes.
have to do it. I think every woman should have the right to get an abortion,
Uh huh.
even though I don't think it's morally correct, given though you don't know
Uh huh.
the circumstances. I mean, you could have been raped, you could have been sexually abused. That changes the
Hmm.
entire ball game. I know I would never get an abortion, but I would fight till the death for someone else to have the right to get an abortion. Also,
Yes.
a gay marriage. I know the Bible is well, the old version of the Bible, the Old Testament, is
Oh,
against gay, being gay apparently.
against
But I
everything.
mean, screw that. So okay,
Yeah.
I won't. Yeah, I'm apparently a straight. Lucky me, but you should have the right to be married if you're gay. Like
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with anybody else. You should have the right to
Hmm.
do that, and I don't think it's morally unjust to go ahead and marry a
Hmm.
significant other. It's your right to do it.
Oh,
I don't know why
hmm.
the state shouldn't have the power to intervene in these sort of things.
Hmm.
The state shouldn't have that amount of power. You should take as much power away from the state as you can, because that never leads to a good place.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's a very slippery slope to give them the power to tell you
Hmm.
what to do with your body, what you're allowed to do with other people. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a scary route.
It's so interesting, and I imagine, I think, from judging our conversation so far, we agree on a lot of things. Because I also am very pro-choice. Let people do what they want with their bodies. Do we
Yeah.
really need the government pouring tax dollars into regulating these things when we could just let it be? And then of course, again, it's not like it's forced on anyone. It's just there as an option, and like options are fine. Options are typically a good thing to have access to. I think it's really interesting to see what people want to use the government to limit and not limit, right? Like on a macro level, one thing I find really interesting in the United States is there's talk of like for the more conservative party, Republican Party. There's a lot of talk about small government, federal government doesn't work, but as soon as they get the power, nothing really changes. It's just like the laws adjust what you can or can't do. The spending doesn't go down. You just keep the course exactly the same, but you're just tweaking where you're regulating and not regulating. Then the Liberal Party takes back and they tweak what you regulate and not regulate. It's never really about. It's so interesting. It is about what you can and can't do, but it's less about opening up rights to everybody, more about what rights should be open on like an ethical level. There's almost like a moral aspect the government tries to take, and it might be. I wonder if it's just simply too far. It's tempting to do, right? You have all the power. You can put your own morals on everyone else, but it gets messy.
It's interesting. We have a saying in the law here. The law is as it is, not as it ought to be, which
Yes.
essentially comes down to the fact that law is not morality. The law is what it is. You need to comply with it. it doesn't mean if you break the law you've done something unethical. Like it's that sort of
Yes.
thing where if you cross a red light in the middle of the night and no one is around to watch, is that
Mm-hmm.
unethical or did you just break the law? Did you hurt
Uh-huh.
anyone? You know,
Right.
it's that sort of question to it's very interesting because once you can make a distinction between what's ethically right and what the law says, you can start thinking for
Mm-hmm.
yourself in a better manner, right? And it's the
Uh-huh.
same with those laws about abortion and such. It's should the law be the law or should it be something that controls the morals, and who decides what is morally right and wrong, right? Because
Uh-huh.
you're always going to have differences about these things. And yeah, it's I mean when I studied law, the most interesting thing about making a new law isn't
Mm-hmm.
about what's right, it's about how it can be abused. It's I know there was this big fight about in America, all the bad things. Sorry, we
Mm-hmm.
only hear the
No
bad
worries.
things, but
It's media.
about
Media. Okay. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the so there was these fights about um whether they should allow transgender people into female bathrooms. And
Mm-hmm.
now that like we studied these things, so the arguments we had was, well, yeah, they have inherent rights. We should allow them to express the way they feel.
Uh-huh.
And but then we had now the reason people were struggling to implement it as law is because we immediately looked at the way this law can be abused.
Yep.
And that's where the big arguments came from, like, what about that one person who pretends to be transgender to sneak into a girl's bathroom and do something horrible?
Mm-hmm.
But then you're punishing this entire majority of people who, have done nothing wrong
Mm-hmm.
in order to protect a small minority of people who will abuse the system. And that's all the law is about people abusing the system, because we need to
Yes.
prevent them from doing that. It's interesting because again, then you
Mm-hmm.
go down to the point where the law is as it is, not as it ought to be. And yeah, being able to
Yes.
distinguish that, it's super important when talking about morality.
I think so. I completely agree. And I think, I'm going to dive in on that transgender law because I find that when people are trying to use laws to enforce morality, it's usually offering a solution in search of a problem. So, for example, preventing people from doing harm in a restroom. As it turns out, there are no force fields around women's restrooms. For example, I could walk into a women's restroom if I wanted
Mm.
to. Nothing's really changed there. That isn't all. I also feel like that discredits existing problems like rape, for example, where they're not typically something like that horrendous act is not actually happening in a bathroom. It's usually in somebody you know, an acquaintance, and it's
Mm.
discounting where the real problems are occurring. It's Oh God, yeah. I feel when you take that straw man argument, pretending the problem that you're trying to protect everyone is actually not there, it's usually because you're motivated by something else. In America, a lot of that
A lot
motivation
of the
comes
times. Yeah,
tons of
a
it,
lot of the times that is the case.
and it
I
comes.
mean,
Hmm.
it's it's projection also. It's one of my favorite things in psychology. Where people, if they're fighting something within themselves, they portray the opposite, and they go really hard about it. So it's if you have preachers who are all about not being gay, and they won't stop talking about it, and they're over projecting this
Hmm.
image, it usually they're gay.
Yes.
It's a psychological phenomenon,
Interesting.
and there are many of these defense mechanisms that are inherent in society, and knowing about them is so interesting because you can spot out peculiar behavior. Like if you keep talking about, being a good Christian, it
Hmm.
oftentimes there are some significant problems in your own life that you're trying to mask, which
Uh-huh.
it's just not very Christian like, if you will. So yeah, it's interesting to note the people who shout the loudest in the crowd.
Yeah, I think it comes. We have one politician in the United States with that rumor, Lindsey Graham, a really staunch conservative, but everyone's like quietly saying, "Oh yeah, he's really gay behind the scenes." He just won't. He just has this persona, this act, and fights against it kind of stuff. Likewise, I think there was an
Mm.
incident with the Catholic Church where somebody high up was very much gay and
Oh,
had
that
gone to a
happens
brothel.
all the time.
And so it makes sense, right? It's so interesting, this human psychology aspect of fighting against who you are. And I think that's so, it goes back earlier to the conversation, that id versus ego, where the ego thinks it
Mm.
needs to be versus id of what you are and trying to manage the two. And if you're trying very hard to blow off the id, it just doesn't work. I think it leaves people mentally all over the place, scatterbrained, like not pieced together properly, as opposed to trying to figure out what you are, what you can or can't do in terms of your wants and needs, and then moving around that and, keeping it like a symbiotic kind of like a symbiotic's not the right word, but like stable situation. Everything interlocking. This is who I am. Let's move forward. It's fascinating.
I mean, the most fascinating is the fact that most of us are comprised of the id, and you don't
Yes.
have access to that. Your ego doesn't. It's hidden, and that's the scary part, because it's that old age argument about, oh, you only use this percentage of your brain. No, you use every single part of your brain,
Yep.
and we're still trying to figure out what certain parts do. And it's that studying that that's so extremely interesting. Like dream analysis is one of my favorite interests, because the id sometimes break through in a dream, because I mean your id, your ego, and your super ego are constantly fighting in order
Yep.
to get your attention, and all of those are trying to protect you and your place in society. The id wants to go feral and have intercourse with everyone, eat as much as they can, and go to bed. That's the id. The id is hiding your primal self. The ego is you, John, and the super ego is the rules of society, and the ego constantly has to weigh the two. But yeah, so in dreams you have these patterns, and a lot of people don't realize. It's interesting, the symbolism, the fact that it's a universal symbolism that somehow exists in all of us, like dreams where you fly. That's a very common dream, and
Yes.
it's a dream you have when you want more freedom, you're trying to escape certain parts of your life, and you start getting flying dreams. And then like another peculiar one that's so specific yet so many people have it is when you start losing your teeth in a dream. That's it comes from the id. It's you being very self-conscious, embarrassed about something. And you I don't know if you've had that dream. I've had it plenty of times where my teeth start falling out in the middle of my dream.
No, that sounds miserable.
It's a very common dream. I'm sure there will be people in chat who've had this specific dream. It's flying, teeth falling out, and what are some of the other very, very common dream phenomena? No, I can't recall.
I mean, the obvious one is sexual dreams.
It's a very common dream. Look it up. I've studied psychology. I have Freud's dream analysis book in my other room. It's a very common dream.
Yeah.
But yeah, falling dream is also very common, though I'm not sure what that symbolizes, because you normally wake up right after it.
Yeah, so I think I appreciate right now that you're just staring at chat trying to hope somebody says I have my teeth fall out in my dreams. You're looking so bad. You're like, I'm trying, please, somebody just say it.
A very common dream. It's extremely common.
Quick, somebody.
I've tasted this and oh gosh. I don't. Okay, only me having the teeth falling out. That's fine. Well, interestingly enough, you don't remember most of your dreams. You have up to 6 dreams every single night.
I can remember one.
And you probably don't remember any one of them most of the time, because you have different REM cycles. And every REM cycle you go with, REM stands for repetitive eye movement, because every time you reach a REM cycle, your eyes go like this under your eyelids. Don't ask me why. So every REM cycle you go into a deeper dream state, and your dreams become more vivid and they become more longer. So the deepest dreams you have are those you have right before you wake up. And that's also why you can feel unrested even if you slept 11 hours, because you have your REM cycles, and then when you reach a certain point, you go back to square one REM cycle. And if you wake up then, you're going to feel unrested because you're only at the start of your REM cycles. But yeah, come on, I've had the teeth dream before. You're lying. You just want to make me feel better.
Yeah, I was wondering if this would be a self-sabotaging comment where you're looking at chat, and I'm sure some people in chat are so nice. They're like, oh yeah, please, I've had the teeth dream. Don't you worry. But yeah, that seems like.
Now, Freud is actually is very controversial with regards to his opinions about sexuality. That's about it. He believes in certain sexual phases. No, all the other things
Uh-huh.
are very prominent. We study those and implement them in everything. No, no,
Hmm.
he's very controversial. One is the Oedipal complex and the Electra complex,
Uh-huh.
which I don't know. Am I allowed to use the P word on your stream, John, or should I rather not?
So the funny part is, I don't even know what the P word is, so just go for it.
Well, is of the firm belief that girls grow up wanting to have peepees, and
You can
boys grow
just
up
use the
wanting
word.
to have
I don't
intercourse with
care.
their mothers.
Yep. Yeah, just go
And
wild. Mhm.
this is widely disputed.
Yes.
We don't believe in this. But with regards to everything of the remember, he came up with the id, the ego, the superego.
Yep.
All psychologists use this
Uh-huh.
terminology, and he created this field of psychology, which is very important, psychoanalysis and
Hmm.
psychotherapy. But with regards to the genitalia thing, and women and men wanting to like like he sincerely believes girls grow up wanting
Hmm.
to have intercourse with their fathers, and then they seek mates that resemble their fathers. Now that's correlation and not causation.
Uh-huh.
Correlation as in women do often seek father figure, people who resemble their fathers. It's something women do, but it's not because they want to have intercourse with their fathers.
Okay.
That's where he got it wrong. So he was a very interesting person. Let's
Hmm.
just put it like that, and
Yep.
very fun to study.
Yes. No, I think that's a really on a macro level, an important part about looking at people. Like we talked about Jordan Peterson earlier, and we separated out the self-help stuff from his political aspects. And likewise at Freud, let's separate out the ego, superego, the id from his thoughts on sexuality, or not sexuality, but sexual tendencies. Like we can divide someone's ideas into questionable, if not wrong, and hey, there might be something here. And people are complex, right? And it makes sense that complex thinkers have good and bad thoughts. And sometimes nail it, and sometimes they just fail it. You know, that's my thought. But I
Of
think
course.
he's an interesting one. I also I need to learn more about how he talks to people, because people say he's like one of the best people to speak with, where he always makes you feel that he's interested in you and your conversation, your words. People describe him as such a natural person to talk to. I've always found that to be
That
very
Jordan
interesting.
Peterson.
Say it one more time.
Are you talking
Oh
about Jordan
no, this is
Peterson?
I'm talking about Freud. Freud.
Freud. Sorry,
Yeah,
because
sorry.
you mentioned both names, so I
I
was
did.
just
Sorry
trying to
about
figure
that.
out which one
No,
you're talking about. Freud.
Jordan Peterson seems like a good guy to talk to, though. Probably a bit more opinionated than I think Freud. I think Freud lets people talk and then hits them at the end. Jordan knows always somebody that comes in with an opinion when I see him either debate or talk of on like a Joe Rogan kind of place. He's a very opinionated person. Not a bad thing, though.
Yeah, well,
Hmm.
Freud invented talk therapy. I mean, he was the
Interesting.
first person to. Yeah, he was the he. This is the thing. This is why Freud is so important, because he started all of these things, and although he wasn't right about all of them, he laid the foundations. And yeah, talk therapy was literally having your client sit down, well, lay down on a couch, and
Hmm.
talk away. And you have a lot of little techniques in there, like just say the first word that comes to mind, and like list them, and as they go on you'll eventually reach the
Hmm.
thing that's bothering you most. But yeah, just talk therapy. So you'd have the client just lay there and talk about everything that's bothering them,
Hmm.
and that in itself was like cathartic, and it was such a
Yes.
big discovery. Like you didn't need the therapist to come up with all of these conclusions and things.
Hmm.
Just having someone to talk to was
Hmm.
like, it was a big discovery. And we still
Yes.
have, like, you have all these little ways to solve problems, and that's why you're going to have different therapists for different people. You're going to have someone who has cognitive behavioral therapy, you're going to have someone who's using Freud's talk therapy tactic, and you
Hmm.
need to find the one for you, which is scary because patients don't know what they need,
Hmm.
and the therapist needs to sort of know what they're doing before they just apply a random theory, because
Hmm.
there are opposite theories, and you have therapists who use theories that they agree with, and
Hmm.
that might not necessarily work for you, which could be a problem, right?
Yes, I think that's actually one of the struggles when people try therapy, where you want to find the therapist that works for you. And
Yeah.
every therapist is like a different flavor of ice cream. Not that they're a bad flavor, like Rocky Road versus vanilla versus chocolate versus strawberry. You just have to find the one that's right for you. Like I like dark
Mhm.
chocolate, But somebody else might like almond, pecan, but that's not like a bad choice, or pecan butter, whatever the one's called. I'm not gonna like that, but if it works for someone else, that's great. But it's so easy. It's so much easier to have ice cream flavors than therapists. I hope as people acknowledge how beneficial it is to get your thoughts out of your head, where this ego, superego, all fighting it out, and just say it, actualize it, how beneficial it can be as you try to dig into yourself. I think it's I
Of
think
course.
I completely agree that every therapist has their own kind of style, and you have to find what works for you.
Yeah, I
Mhm,
mean, it's pretty important. But yeah, it's sad because you
mhm,
often have people who literally just need someone to talk to, and
mhm,
that's a bigger. There's a reason we have so many therapists in the world, and we have a lot of people who don't believe in them, but the other half are the silent, the silent few who all go to them because they just need to talk about things. And they
mhm.
don't have someone to talk to, and it's sad. It's actually quite
Yeah.
tragic. But
It,
if it helps, right?
I mean, 100%. But if it helps to talk to someone, just talk to someone. And I hope as people warm up to it, becomes more mainstream, there's more access to it, where not everyone has it. And I know for like men in the United States, anyways, suicide rate is higher than women. But there's this. I was slowly working away from it, but like a suck it up mentality. When you're feeling emotional, you have problems, you just tough it out. But the downside of that is it's so draining on the mental, where sometimes you need to talk it out to find the solution and resolve the problem instead of just like brute forcing your way through it. So there's serious psychological benefits. I like to think of therapy as like the greatest cheat code ever, because it helps you get to
Mm.
a second mind to help you sort out your thoughts so you can figure out what you want to do, getting there even faster. Um,
That's an interesting statistic, by the way. Did you know that more women attempt suicide than men do, but more
Interesting.
men actually kill themselves? Um, it's an interesting statistic. Yeah,
That's
it's
a
so
skill I
you have
don't.
a lot more attempted suicides by women, but the men actually go through with it. So you have more men killing themselves,
That's a
but you have more women attempting it
interesting.
altogether.
That's a really
It's
bad skill.
interesting. Yeah, you can have a lot of theories with regard to that. It's
Mhm.
yeah, I know I'm laughing now. It's not a laughing matter, but yeah, the thing is, men normally go for like brute physical force. They literally they'll take a gun and end
Yeah.
it that way. Where women will maybe go and take a few pills, and you can also argue that some just cry. It's a cry for help, and that's the
Mhm.
only way they feel like they can do it.
Yes.
Whereas men, like you said, men don't necessarily go and talk about things. They don't go for the cry for
Interesting.
help. They just go for the solution and end it. But yeah, it's an interesting statistic. Yeah,
Dark one.
it's a dark
Yeah.
statistic. Yeah.
That's interesting. That the difference of whether it's I mean, my mind mentally chalks up the culture immediately, because you can make I am confident you can create a culture of people that are comfortable talking about their problems. Uh
Mm, it's
but
getting better.
I think so. I
A
agree.
little bit by little bit. It's getting better.
It's so funny. I was There was a debate in Discord, on my Discord, because we have a channel. Is it really like a? It's not really a politics channel. Well, I can't really check it. We're using Discord, obviously, but we're having like a political debate, talking a bit about race. We're all really, really playing it. And I was really proud of our channel for doing it. But I thought it was a really interesting point where someone's like was looking macro at income levels by ethnic group, and said, look, things are getting better. But I'm like, yes, but it's getting better because we're continuing to push so hard to make progress. It's kind of on my mind of
Hmm.
this progress. Like, I completely agree things are getting better, but you can't even let up I feel like you never let up the momentum of constantly talking about like the value of therapy or other issues like that, conversations about race, income inequality, etc. Because they're not going to keep getting better if we stop and let people say, oh, this is enough, we're done. Like, you have to keep with that same pressure, even though things are getting better, which I think is, I don't know, like macro on the individual level it applies, on a macro level it applies. I find it to be super interesting. But I am hopeful
Oh,
about the
certainly.
future. Um, mhm,
Yeah, hopeful. Yeah, there's so many aspects of the future. The thing is, some things are going better, other things are going worse. Like,
mhm,
it's people are getting more divided, I feel, on topics. Like at
yes.
least like politics per se.
Uh huh.
It's feeling more like the purge every time you've got voting going on there in America, from my
Uh-huh.
South African ignorant point of view. And
Uh-huh.
I feel like, at some point, if you had a Trump voter,
Uh-huh.
in your workplace, he could get fired, and he'd hate the Hillary voters, and the Hillary voters would hate him. But that's what I saw in the media. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if that's
It's
how it's on on the ground. If people really, you see someone with a MAGA hat, and you think, well, they're evil people, and
I
they
think
should they get
mhm.
punched in the back of the head. I'm not sure how that works, but it seems awfully bad.
I so here's my experience. So I live in Pennsylvania. It was one of the swing states. It was a key state in
Mm,
the election. And also I live in the suburbs. So I have every one
okay.
state or one sign would be for Joe Biden in the past election. Next house over would have a
Yeah.
Trump sign. Next house over would have a Joe
Mm,
Biden sign. Next house over would have a Trump sign. It was just like, wow, this whole street's like split. I truly, at the time, because I did at the time, and still happy it worked out this way, I voted for Joe Biden. And I remember walking down the street, I'm like, wow, everyone's talking about it comes down to Pennsylvania, and I'm walking down the road, and everyone has different opinions. I can't
it's
comment.
scary
It's interesting. I have two
because it's
kind of thoughts.
opposites.
Well,
It's
kind of. It feels like
polarizing
opposites.
groups. Well, yeah, that's how the media portrays it to outsiders like me, at least.
Uh-huh. Yes, and I think this is the problem in media in capitalism. And this is where I reflect about this a lot. And actually it's one of my motivations of like why I like these conversations. I want to create a place to have these conversations. Media has a for-profit agenda. Most media companies have a private family that really likes having lots of money, or publicly traded, which means they have an obligation to the public shareholders to make them money. Humans psychologically speaking, like negativity. We attach to negativity and engage with more in positivity. So it's a lot easier to retain people to watch a show and pump them full of commercials if you give them negative topics. If you say those
Mhm.
people are destroying society, instead of saying like, we're all pretty close together. It's just like we're having a few hiccups here or there. A little bit more of a positive take. Everyone's like gonna shut off that, move elsewhere. And we saw this particularly in the 2020 election with the rise of two new media networks called Newsmax and OAN. It's like One American Network, I believe is what it stands for. Where these are really right wing, really conservative networks, which are very polarized, very much us versus them. And when Fox News would contradict Trump, saying fact check Trump, contradict them, more people get angry and tweet at them like, I'm moving over to these networks. They're moving over to the ones that'll feed them a more polarized sense of news. And quickly, for me, it was a learning lesson of media is all about profit. And if giving you very polarizing views will give you more profit, media is incentivized to at the expense of society, at the expense of the peace, because the peace doesn't pay the bills. If anything, protest rioting pays the bills even more. The media has a strong incentive to tear people apart and do anything they can to engage you. And I worry about that long term. I think media is something that capitalism does not do well with. I think it's one of the areas that, because of that contradiction where truth is not the end goal, but profit, gets messy.
What's really scary about that sentiment is it's a proven psychological phenomenon
Uh-huh.
that if you tell someone a really bad fact, like let's say you're a politician and you tell a horrible lie, but
Uh-huh.
it's a very memorable one. That's like how can I put it? Yeah, it's memorable
Yeah.
because of its shock factor. We as humans have evolved to remember the bad things
Uh-huh.
and the things that stand out more than the normal things. And what happens is they've proven psychologically, and I mean, all the politicians probably know this, that if you tell an outrageous lie to an audience and it comes out that it was a lie, in a few months from then on,
Mm-hmm.
people will remember it as
Mm-hmm.
just a fact, and they'll forget about the lie part. And it's been proven countless times. If you just continue to spout lies, people
Mm-hmm.
eventually forget the fact that it was a lie, unless it was a really big lie, and they kind of just remember the thing that was said. So yeah, like if you
Yep.
said something like, "Well, Hillary once kicked a dog. I saw her kick a dog." If Trump said something along those lines, and the
Uh-huh.
next day in the headlines, it's like, Trump lied. Hillary did not kick a dog. In a
Yes.
few months from now, most people will remember the fact that, oh yeah, Hillary kicked a dog that one time.
Uh-huh.
Do you recall that? Because it's more memorable and it's very shocking. Like it was when I was studying social
Mm-hmm.
psychology, and I was considering writing it all up and putting it in like something that people can access about the way politicians can manipulate people,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many psychological things, and it's when you know these things in yourself, that's when you can start fighting against it. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so it's more profitable for a politician to just tell an outrageous lie
Mm-hmm.
to make his opponent look bad than to actually tell the truth, because at the end of the day, when the votes come in, people just kind of remember, oh yeah, that politician did a bad
Mm-hmm.
thing. I can't remember what, but I'm not going to vote
Yeah.
for him now. And it's quite scary the way that works, and I think the
Mm-hmm.
media works in a similar way, like you said.
Yes. I think for the media, it's profit, but in the United States right now, we're actually seeing the efforts of probably like 5 to 10 years of perpetuating a lie come to fruition to the benefit of the people who are perpetuating it. Where in 2020, there was a lot of talk about voter fraud. There was like no voter fraud. There were tons of lawsuits by the Trump administration. They couldn't find any. The only voting fraud I was aware of is one person voted for Trump on behalf of his dead grandmother in Pennsylvania. That is one vote. And it was caught. And if you get caught, if they are doing a vote that's illegal, it's a felony, which will probably bar you from access to most jobs, up to 5 years in prison, and like I think $250,000 in fine. It's like a triple threat that ruins your life for one vote. So voting fraud doesn't happen in the United States, but there's been this push for a long time to put IDs in place on voting, which sounds really commonsensical, except we're not having a voter ID problem. Actually, voter ID or voter fraud is not an issue in the United States. Media manipulation is. Russia, coming in, making fake Facebook groups and fake tweets to push an agenda, and other dictatorships doing that. That is a problem for the United States. We have to wrestle that. But there's no voter fraud issue. The voter ID seems so common sense. But what's really happening is, it's just a statistic. More Republicans have valid IDs like driver's licenses, than Democrats.
Mm.
So if I restrict voting IDs, I'm more likely to disenfranchise Democrat votes than Republican votes. So there's this huge push by Republicans to make this solution to this problem that they propagated for years about voter fraud, in order to just simply, because we have a two-party system, it's a zero-sum game. One party is going to statistically have more IDs than the other one. If you put voter IDs in place, you swing it. You swing the voting population slightly more conservative by disenfranchising members of both parties, but statistically more liberals. And that has been fascinating to me. How you're able to, by perpetuating this, it's been going on for years. Trump really ran with it, and now they're starting to be able to push the laws in states, which is wild.
That's what's so scary to me, because I know it's the norm now in your countries, but with mine, problems are so practical. It's like, oh, where did this lump sum of money go? Oh yes, the president stole the sum of money.
True.
It's that simple. That is all we have. That is it. In your country, there's this five-head manipulation, and it's like this party's doing this and this party's doing that, and we're going to start the slander campaign here, and the other one is going to bring in immigrants, and then that party's going to fight against it with this. And there's all of this, like, you can actually have conversations about it. Here it's
Yes.
just, well, he stole a lot of money, but this party might steal a little bit less money.
Yeah.
So we should consider voting for that party instead. And it's as simple as that. And I think that's why your politics scares me so much, because there's actual debates going on. It's not as straightforward as one would like to think. And the propaganda, my gosh, we don't have that here. It's just, again, straight up. You don't even need propaganda. You just give the facts, and that's enough to scare you and give you nightmares. Yeah. So hats off to you.
Yeah, it's very different. And I will say one thing again, at the end of the day, I don't think either party truly, like, they're all self-interested politicians. But the system is robust enough that says enough people get the power that do care about the country that we move forward, even though this stuff goes on behind the scenes, where there is a five-headedness. Like, both parties will rig districts in their favor via gerrymandering. That just is how our politics works. But I will say the benefit is, again, we're moving in a direction where it's not like I'm trying to pocket everything. Now, do politicians make a lot of money speaking gigs? Yes. Do a lot of politicians leave Congress and then become lobbyists, getting paid big bucks to lobby their friends who are still congressmen? manipulate their opinions. Yes, we have our problems, but I am grateful to the United States in the sense of it's not like, oh, yeah, let me just write myself a check. It takes a lot of effort to do the corruption, and it's not enough that, you're not sitting there saying, well, our water is going to run out. There's day zero is coming, or, there's rolling blackouts.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
We keep
Exactly.
it together. And then and then one other thing I think is beneficial to the United States is if there is an enemy, an external enemy, boy, we will like all come together, say, well, we really hate ourselves, but we hate you more, and our whole country is fine going down with the let's go with the, double down on this hate. And when we come together, we do some pretty crazy stuff, for better or worse. Some of the stuff we do, but it's something we're good at. Is that last minute
Excuse
come
me for
together?
constantly referencing studies, but yeah, that's
Please.
101. The what do you call it? The Pirates Cove experiments, where they
Mm-hmm.
proved the best way to unite different groups
Uh huh.
is by getting a common enemy.
Oh yeah, it's
They it
all
was
about the common enemy.
it's all these old experiments, so unethical but so useful.
Yep.
We'd never be able to replicate them. Where they tricked boys into coming into a camp, like a summer camp, and they divided them into groups, and they got those boys to hate the other groups,
Uh
and
huh.
with all psychological tactics. And then in the end, what they did was they said, okay, well, you now need to do this task in order to get this reward.
Mm-hmm.
And you got these boys working together, and like at the end they were best friends after hating each other. And they've been doing replicating this and using this authority as an experiment to do it with race in South Africa. Like one
Mm-hmm.
of my professors, that's always doing right now, is he's implementing the Pirate Cove experiments with people of color and white people. And I think he's targeting groups where there's a lot of racial tension. And he's trying to
Mm-hmm.
do exactly that, where he gets a common enemy and trying to get them to work together. Because if you can do that, you can unite a nation. And
Yes.
yeah, if you have someone attacking America, you're gonna see those two parties come together like
Uh huh.
glue. It's the best way to unite people. And yeah, you just need a
Mm-hmm.
common enemy. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I will say one thing that goes on we haven't talked about in politics is or at least in the United States, what happens if both parties agree, which things get messy. So a great example of this common enemy, after Twin Towers went down, was terrorism, and therefore passed the Patriot Act, which was an unbelievably intrusive act that gave up a lot of freedoms, gave the ability for the government to look into all kinds of stuff on people, give them a lot of power here. But of course, when they came together, there's a cost to that. I also think the unspoken topics are fascinating as well. Where if you have a Joe Biden and Trump, what would be the difference? And like where would they agree? And then you don't get a choice in that. Because if Joe Biden and Trump would do the same particular tax break here, border policy there, nothing, there's no big change. It just is how it is. You never had a choice on changing that. I find that to be a very fascinating, the unspoken politics as well. Because the country doesn't move very quickly. Even our laws are slow. Like marijuana right now, we know the war on drugs has failed, but enough people on both parties is like, we'll take our time, and we do take our time. So I think that's the other hidden part to it all is where when they both agree, no news gets out, but nothing changes there either, even if it might be a problem. Um,
That's definitely a human problem we have all across the world. Don't fret.
mm-hmm.
I mean, no government is perfect. It's
Yep.
simply not the case. At least yours is. I mean,
I mean,
you
I'm
can't
great.
argue your country is better off than many other
Oh yeah,
countries.
no,
And
no, America's great in many ways.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna have your. That's why people criticize. Well, if you didn't know by now, but yeah, people like criticizing America and other countries
Uh
because
huh.
they only see the worst. And the thing is, you have always been, at least in the South African point of view,
Mm-hmm.
we see America as like the standard of how society can be and
Yep.
the standard of how a country should be. And when things started, like, when we started getting media of the political parties fighting,
Uh huh.
we started critically analyzing your country and figuring out what the hell's going wrong. Because, like I said, we have a very westernized culture in South Africa because we look
Mm-hmm.
at American media, American television. We look at Europe as well, but it's more American for some reason. And that's why we hold you to such a high standard,
Uh
because
huh.
everyone wanted to move to America. Like everyone in
Yes.
this country wants to get out, and America was normally the choice. But yeah, it's just so you know, it's not that
Yeah.
America is in flames, like you said. It's just people hold you to a high standard because
Uh huh.
you are a very like a giant, you know? You're
No,
a giant in the world in a lot of
we are.
ways.
And we have a ton of problems too. But I will say at the end of the day, like, am I happy to be born in America? Yeah, like 100%. Have I ever considered moving to another country? No. Move another state? Sure. But like the fact that you can go to Texas, California, Georgia, Alabama. Alabama might not be the best example, but there are lots of. Sorry to insult everybody from Alabama. Well, there's some nice parts, I think, in the north of Alabama. But there are lots of different parts of the United States because it's so big with so many different cultures, so many different ideas. And it never surprises me that there's all this conflict because somebody who grew up in Los Angeles is going to have an entirely different experience in New York City than somebody who's going to grow up in like rural Virginia. And their life experiences or cultures, like it's all going to be different. But that's like the benefit of the USA. We can move wherever you want. And together, we really do have a powerhouse of a country. But we should continue to be really critical about it and trying to keep improving it because there's still work to do.
I mean, yeah, well, again, I specifically refer to South Africa in this regard. Like, yeah, all your things trickle down to us at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you had Black Lives Matter, it
Yep.
became a thing here in South Africa, and it suddenly became a big, and we already had movements, but whoop, and now we had that one, and then we had now your COVID conspiracy theorists start tweeting things, and now you have people in South Africa dead set on not getting 5G and not wanting to be tracked by the government.
Yeah, we really messed that one up.
I'm not saying I blame America. I'm just saying
there is a particular
our people are influenced by you. Don't ask me why.
I will.
But
it's
rather funny.
Blame a very particular, prominent, very good at keeping attention politician for casting doubt and on vaccines historically.
It's ridiculous here.
And that might have politicized a lot of things like social distancing, mask wearing, and vaccines, which has led to one political party worth of people, a good chunk of them having doubts, which I get. We go back to that media, go back for profit, negativity. But it makes me sad because there's that difference of prevention versus knowing, and now we know what COVID does. Kills a lot of people. Very effective at it. And we know that vaccines work. Why am I not worried about smallpox? Because we wiped that thing out. We wiped out a bunch of diseases. Like, just get the vaccines. Move on. The science is there. If you doubt it, just become a doctor. There's a reason every doctor, the people who've specialized in medicine, and say, you should get this. It's not perfect. I felt really sick the day afterwards. I felt very tired specifically. The day after shot number 2. Am I happy? Yes. Can I get back to my life? Yes. Am I going to be safer? Yes. Am I going to threaten my grandparents? No. Who also got the vaccine? Like, that's all really good. And I think it's one of the weaknesses of the media. Like, it's sad. And people will give airtime to people who stir up doubt because they're very engaging. I also think there's like, I'm sure you know probably a lot more, but I feel like there is a psychological tendency for people to want to feel that they're right, to feel that they know more than the other people, that the other people are idiots, they are sheep, and I know everything, and that following the majority is bad. But in this case, it's not how it works. The majority is right here. The science is out here. Let's get things going. Excellent. Well, look forward to another follow-up then. Thank you so much and take care. Shout out to Ahmed Ali and Pamsasaurus for all their support on Patreon.